"You're just the spare daughter," my mother said. She stood close enough that I could smell the lemon hand cream she kept beside the sink in the tasting room. Behind her, people were arriving for the founders' dinner. I could hear chairs moving across the barn floor and Shelby laughing near the front doors. Mom lowered her voice. "Shelby is the future. Don't embarrass this family tonight." There was a cream-colored folder tucked under her arm. She kept pressing it against her side as if I might grab it. I didn't. I looked past her at the tables I'd spent 9 years arranging, repairing, booking, and cleaning up after. Every candle was lit. Every place card was straight. The old orchard doors were open to the July evening. Then I looked back at my mother. "What exactly do you think I'm going to do?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. That was the strange part. She needed something from me. I knew that much. I just hadn't understood how badly until she started insulting me before she asked. "My name is Cassandra Lawson, and I'm 35 years old. If you've ever been called dependable by people who really meant available, you'll understand why I stayed calm. Like the video and subscribe, because this took years to see clearly. To explain how I ended up standing there, I have to go back to the previous fall, when my parents made my younger sister the managing director of Lawson Orchard House. The Orchard House sits at 418 Alder Crest Road in McMinnville, Oregon. It's an old white farmhouse, a converted event barn, and a tasting room surrounded by rows of apple and pear trees. My parents, Deborah and Stephen Lawson, started hosting weddings there after my father stopped trying to make the orchard profitable through fruit alone. By the time I became operations director in 2017, the place had already developed a reputation. It was pretty, warm, and slightly unreliable. The barn roof leaked near the west wall. The kitchen breaker tripped if someone ran both convection ovens with the industrial dishwasher. The gravel parking area turned soft after 3 days of rain. Couples loved the string lights and old beams. They didn't love learning any of those other details. My job was making sure they never did. I opened the property before vendors arrived. I checked table counts, delivery times, alcohol permits, staffing, weather, and parking plans. I knew which caterer always needed 10 extra minutes and which florist would block the service entrance unless someone stopped her. I also knew how to fix the tasting room toilet with a flathead screwdriver. My sister Shelby knew how to sell the place. She was 22 by then, outgoing and polished, with a way of making every couple feel like their wedding was the only event we'd ever hosted. She could walk through the barn with a bride, point toward an empty corner, and describe a champagne wall so clearly that the bride would start crying. That was useful. I never denied it. The problem was that Shelby liked the promise more than the delivery. She would add an outdoor cocktail station without checking the weather plan. She would approve a band without asking about electrical needs. Once, she promised a couple that their guests could release floating lanterns over the orchard. I found out when a box marked Sky Lanterns arrived 2 days before the wedding. I carried it into the office and set it on Shelby's desk. "You can't release these here," I said. She was scrolling through photographs on her phone. "They're biodegradable. They're on fire. They float away." "Yes, Shelby, that's the part I'm concerned about." She looked up and smiled like I was being difficult for sport. "Mom said it was fine. Mom didn't call the fire marshal." Shelby leaned back in her chair. "So call him." I did. He said no. I found battery-lit paper balloons that could be tied along the orchard path instead. The couple loved them. Shelby posted the photographs and wrote a caption about bringing their vision to life. No one mentioned the box of fire hazards in my office. That was how things worked. Shelby created the moment. I removed whatever could burn, flood, fail, or get us sued. My parents called us a good team. In 2018, a year after I took over operations, Orchard House nearly closed. We lost several winter bookings after a plumbing failure damaged the tasting room. Insurance covered part of it, but not enough. My parents had already used their available cash on roof repairs and payroll. I had savings from years of living cheaply and working more weekends than I could count. I contributed $60,000 to the business. It wasn't a loan. My father insisted it should buy me a real position in the company. We sat at the tasting room bar with an accountant and signed an updated operating agreement for the Family Limited Liability Company. I received voting membership. I remember the pen skipping on the last page. Dad handed me another one and said, "This makes it official. You're not just working here. You're invested here." Mom nodded, but she was checking an email on her phone. The signed agreement went into a folder. I took my copy home and put it in a locked file box in my apartment. After that, I thought my membership mostly meant quarterly reports, tax forms, and one annual meeting that usually turned into lunch. The business stabilized. Bookings returned. The tasting room reopened. And because the crisis passed, everyone slowly went back to behaving as if my $60,000 had been a very generous favor instead of an investment. I didn't argue about it. That's important. At the time, I still believed the work would eventually speak for me. Then, in September of 2025, my parents called a family meeting. It happened on a Monday morning when the venue was closed. I arrived carrying coffee and a box of replacement hinges for the storage cabinets. Shelby was already seated beside Mom at the long planning table. There were printed agendas at each chair. That should have warned me. My mother only printed agendas when she wanted a decision to feel finished before anyone discussed it. Dad came in from the orchard and wiped his boots on the mat. "Okay," he said, "let's get started." Mom folded her hands. "We've been talking about the next stage for Orchard House." I looked at Shelby. She was trying not to smile. Mom continued, "We need someone focused on growth, visibility, and long-term direction." "Someone besides me?" I asked. "You're focused on operations," Mom said. "That's different." "I'm asking what's changing." Shelby reached over and touched Mom's arm. "Let her finish." I looked at her hand, then at her face. Mom said, "Your father and I are appointing Shelby managing director." The room went quiet except for the refrigerator behind the tasting bar. I set my coffee down carefully. "What does that mean for my position?" "Nothing has to change," Dad said quickly. "You'll still run operations, so Shelby will manage me." Shelby gave a small laugh. "It doesn't have to sound like that." "What should it sound like?" She looked toward Mom. Mom answered for her. "It means Shelby will lead development and strategy. You'll continue handling events, vendors, staff, and the property." That was almost the entire business. I opened the printed agenda. Shelby's new title appeared at the top. My role was listed beneath hers. Operations support. I tapped the words with one finger. "I'm the operations director." "Of course you are," Dad said. "Then why does this say support?" Mom leaned forward. "Cassandra, please don't turn a title adjustment into a personal rejection." I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't even moved in my chair. Shelby picked up her coffee. "I honestly thought you'd be relieved," she said. "You're always saying you have too much to do. I say we need more staff, and now I can help make decisions about that. You've canceled 3 interviews this year. They weren't the right fit. One of them had 12 years of venue experience. She didn't understand our brand. The woman had asked for health insurance. That was the part Shelby hadn't liked. Dad pulled out a chair and sat down. "We're not replacing you, Cass." Mom gave him a look. "Nobody said replacing. No, you're just placing Shelby over me." Shelby sighed. "Why does everything have to be over or under with you?" "Because that's how an organization chart works." Mom pushed the agenda toward me. "Shelby has ideas. She has relationships. She understands where the wedding market is going. And I don't?" "You understand how to keep things running," Mom said. "That's your strength." There it was, my family's favorite compliment. Dependable, practical, good in a crisis. Every one of those words came with an invisible request attached. I looked at Dad. "Did you agree to this?" He rubbed the side of his jaw. "I think it's worth trying." That answer told me he had agreed because disagreeing with Mom would have required a longer conversation. I closed the agenda. All right. Shelby blinked. I think she'd prepared herself for a fight and felt cheated when I didn't give her one. Mom smiled. "Good. Then we can move forward. What are we moving forward with?" Shelby and Mom exchanged a quick look. It lasted maybe a second, but I saw it. Shelby opened her leather notebook. "Nothing final yet," she said. I've been exploring ways to make the property more of a destination. What kind of ways? Overnight options, premium experiences, things that bring in revenue outside event days. Dad looked down at the table. I waited. Shelby kept talking. Couples want convenience. If the wedding party could stay on site, we could create packages instead of selling a single day. How would they stay on site? She smiled. Cabins. That was the first time I heard the word. Not contracts, not loans, not construction, just cabins delivered like she was suggesting new napkins. How many? I asked. We're still developing the concept. Where? Near the North Orchard. The North Orchard floods. It gets wet. It held standing water for 6 weeks last winter. Mom lifted one hand. This is exactly why Shelby needs you involved. You know the practical side. I looked at the agenda again. Operations support. What's the budget? We're not there yet, Shelby said. Has anyone talked to the county? We're not there yet. Utilities. Cass, it's an early concept. Then what relationships have already been formed? She stopped turning the pen between her fingers. I noticed because Shelby was rarely still. What do you mean? She asked. You said you'd been exploring. With whom? A few people? Contractors? People in the industry. Which industry? Mom's chair scraped back. We are not cross-examining your sister. I'm asking about a project on property I partly own. The words changed the air in the room. Mom looked at me as if I'd mentioned something private and embarrassing. Shelby's smile thinned. Dad cleared his throat. You have membership in the company, Mom said. Let's not make it sound like you own a section of the orchard. I didn't say I did. You said partly own. I contributed capital. I have a voting interest. That was the agreement. And we've always respected that, Dad said. I looked at him. When did we last vote on anything? He didn't answer. Shelby closed her notebook. This is why I didn't want to bring up the cabin concept yet. Every idea becomes a list of reasons it can't happen. No, every idea becomes a list of questions you should answer before spending money. I haven't asked you for money. Then why are you nervous? Mom stood. That's enough. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. Shelby got the office with the orchard view. I kept the smaller room near the service hall because, as Mom explained, I needed to be close to deliveries. I went back to work. For the next several weeks, Shelby talked about expansion without giving me anything solid. She ordered sample welcome baskets. She met with a branding consultant. She had photographs taken near the North Orchard with a picnic table, 2 wool blankets, and a bottle of wine. Meanwhile, I handled 6 weddings, a refrigerator repair, and a server who quit during dinner service because Shelby had changed the schedule without telling her. Then, one Thursday afternoon, a man called asking for Shelby. I was at the office computer fixing a seating chart. Rain tapped against the small window above my desk. Lawson Orchard House. This is Cassandra. Hi, Cassandra. This is Martin Hale. I'm returning Shelby's call about the option deadline. I stopped moving the mouse. What option deadline? There was a pause. Is Shelby available? She's off-site. All right. Just tell her the deposit has been received. We need the remaining project information before the option period ends. I reached for a pen. What project information? Another pause. Longer this time. I should speak with Shelby. Of course. I wrote his name and number on a yellow message slip. When does the option period end? I'll let Shelby discuss that with you. He hung up politely. I sat there with the phone still against my ear. The office door opened a few minutes later. Shelby walked in, carrying a shopping bag and shaking rain from her coat. Was that Martin? She asked. I set down the phone. You were expecting him? She put the shopping bag behind her desk. He's helping with early site work. He said a deposit was received. Her face changed, then smoothed out. It's not a big deal. What did you put a deposit on? An option. An option for what? Cabin sites. I waited for more. She took off her coat. It just holds the opportunity while we finish planning. How much? I don't have time to do this right now. Did Mom and Dad approve it? Yes. Did they sign something? Shelby looked toward the open hallway. Why are you acting like you caught me stealing? I'm asking what the company committed to. You handle operations. I handle development. That doesn't answer me. She picked up the message slip. I'll call Martin. Then she walked into her new office and shut the door. I stayed at my desk until I heard her start speaking in the low, friendly voice she used when she wanted someone to think everything was under control. For once, I didn't return to the seating chart. I opened the shared company calendar. Shelby had blocked out the following Tuesday morning with 2 words: financing review. The calendar entry had no location and no names attached. I printed it. Then I went home that night, pulled the locked file box from the bottom of my closet, and found the folder I hadn't opened in years. The folder was under old tax returns and a stack of appliance warranties. I carried the file box to my kitchen table and unlocked it. The operating agreement still had 4 colored signature tabs stuck along the right edge. My copy of the $60,000 transfer confirmation was clipped behind it. I sat down and read the first few pages. Most of the language was exactly as dull as I remembered. The company owned and operated the venue. My parents were founding members. I had been admitted as a voting member after contributing capital. Each member's interest was listed on a separate schedule near the back. I turned to that page. My name was there. So was my contribution. I wasn't confused about what I had received in exchange. I hadn't imagined the conversation at the tasting room bar. I had a vote because I had put money into a failing business when nobody else could. I took a photograph of the page with my phone. Then I heard myself thinking, Mom wouldn't let Shelby risk the property without telling me. I actually thought that. The calendar entry, the option deposit, and Shelby's reaction were all sitting in front of me, and I was still searching for the version of events that made my mother reasonable. I closed the folder before I reached the later sections. It was almost midnight and I had a rehearsal dinner the next day. I told myself I would read the rest over the weekend. At 6:15 the next morning, Shelby called. I was standing in my bathroom with a toothbrush in my mouth. "Are you almost here?" she asked. I pulled the toothbrush out. "I'm not scheduled until 8. The rental company came early." "Which rental company?" "The one with the lounge furniture." I closed my eyes. The couple had ordered 2 velvet sofas, 4 chairs, and several low tables for the covered patio. The delivery window started at 9. Why are they there now? I don't know, Cass. They're just here. Who let them through the gate? Dad. Then Dad can show them the patio. They need someone to sign. You're the managing director. I'm not dressed. Neither was I. I looked at my reflection. There was toothpaste on my lower lip. "Sign the delivery form," I said. "I don't know what I'm checking, the item count and condition. What if something's wrong? Write it on the form." She went quiet. In my family, silence was often the space where they waited for me to volunteer. I rinsed my mouth. "Shelby? What? Count the pieces. Check for stains and tears. Photograph anything damaged. I have a call at 7. It's 6:15. They're already unloading. Then you have time." She let out a breath. "Fine." I hung up. That was the first time in years I had given Shelby instructions without also getting in my car to make sure she followed them. I lasted 11 minutes. Then Dad called. "Your sister's having trouble with the delivery." "What kind of trouble?" "One of the sofas looks blue. They ordered slate. This looks more navy. Take a picture in daylight." We did. "Shelby says you approved gray. I approved the couple's selection. It's listed as slate. Could you come take a look?" I stared at the clean shirt I'd laid across my bed. "I'll be there by 7. "Thanks, kiddo." The relief in his voice came so quickly that I felt useful before I felt annoyed. That was the hook. It wasn't only that my family expected me to fix things, I liked being the person who could. I arrived at 6:42. Shelby was standing under the patio roof in leggings and a long coat. She held a clipboard against her chest while 2 delivery workers waited beside the truck. She pointed at the sofa. "That's blue. It's slate. It doesn't match the linen sample. The linen isn't going on the sofa." She looked at the delivery worker. "See what I deal with?" He studied the ground. I checked the order on my phone. The item number matched. One chair had a split seam near the back leg, so I photographed it and marked the damage on the form. The company agreed to replace it before noon. Problem solved. Shelby handed me the clipboard. "Can you finish this? I need to get ready. You can finish it. You already know what to write. So do you now?" She stared at me for a second. Dad came out carrying 2 travel mugs. "What's happening?" "The furniture is correct," I said. "One chair is damaged. They're replacing it." "Great." He handed a mug to Shelby. "See? Easy fix." Shelby took the coffee. Dad hadn't brought one for me. It was a small thing. I could have gone inside and made my own. There were coffee supplies in the tasting room because I ordered them. Still, I noticed. Shelby signed the form with an irritated little slash and walked toward the farmhouse with Dad. I stayed behind to help the delivery workers place the tables where the layout showed. By 9, the patio looked good. By noon, the replacement chair had arrived. The florist hung greenery along the barn doors, and the caterer began setting up in the kitchen. Shelby returned wearing cream trousers and a green blouse. She walked through the patio, took a photograph, and posted it to the venue's social media account. When I passed her near the bar, she turned the phone toward me, already getting messages. The caption called the lounge setup one of Shelby's new premium details. "You should tag the rental company," I said. "I will later." She didn't. That evening, the groom's mother thanked Shelby for finding the furniture. Shelby smiled and said, "We wanted the space to feel comfortable, not overly formal." I was carrying a tray of empty glasses when she said it. She saw me. For half a second, I thought she might add my name. Instead, she asked, "Cass, can you have someone wipe the tables?" I handed the tray to a server and wiped them myself. After the rehearsal dinner, I found Mom in the tasting room counting the cash tips for the bar staff. "Did you know Shelby paid an option deposit?" I asked. Her fingers stopped over the bills. Then she continued counting. She mentioned it. "For cabin sites? It's part of the concept." "How much did she pay?" Mom put the bills into separate envelopes. "You'll have to ask Shelby." I did. And she didn't answer. Mom pressed down the flap of an envelope. "Then she probably didn't have the number in front of her. It's a deposit. She knows the number. You're assuming everyone keeps numbers in their head the way you do." That was one of Mom's favorite ways to protect Shelby. Any expectation became evidence that I was unusually rigid. "Did you approve the contract?" I asked. "It's an option, Cassandra, not a construction contract. Did you read it?" "Your father did." "Dad read the whole thing?" Mom gave me a tired look. We were comfortable with the decision. That wasn't an answer. She knew it wasn't. I leaned against the bar. Why wasn't I told? Because it wasn't an operations decision. It involves the property. It involves the possibility of future development. Paid for by the company? Shelby has a development budget. Since that was the first I'd heard of it, I asked, "How much?" Mom placed the last tip envelope in a row. "I'm not doing this after an event." "Then when are we doing it?" "We have Sunday dinner." Sunday dinner was where business questions went to disappear. Mom would serve roast chicken, Dad would open wine, Shelby would arrive late, and if I asked anything specific, Mom would say we should enjoy one meal as a family. "I want the contract before Sunday," I said. Mom's expression changed. It wasn't anger exactly. It was surprise that I had set a time. Why? Because I'm a voting member. You keep saying that as if we've denied it. I keep saying it because nobody else does. Mom gathered the envelopes. "You have always had an important role here. What role is that? Don't do this. I'm asking. You're the person we count on." That should have felt good. For years it had. Now all I heard was a job description without authority. Mom carried the envelopes toward the safe in the office. As she passed me, she touched my arm. "Shelby needs room to grow." "You had room." "When?" She looked genuinely confused. "You've run this place for years." "Yes, because you needed someone to run it, and we trusted you. But you didn't put me in charge." Mom sighed. "This is exactly what I was worried about. You're turning Shelby's opportunity into a judgment about your worth." I stood there without answering. She softened her voice. "Honey, you know how much we value you. Then show me the option contract. Her hand dropped from my arm. You can ask Shelby tomorrow. She'll say she's busy. Then ask her Monday. She'll tell me it's development, not operations. Mom looked toward the office door. We're all tired. She walked away. I went back into the barn and checked that the candles were out. The next day was the wedding. Rain started at 2 in the afternoon just as the photographer arrived. The forecast had shown a chance of showers, so I'd already moved the ceremony chairs beneath the barn overhang. The couple had wanted the orchard, but the ground was too soft. Shelby came through the side doors while my staff carried the last row inside. "Why are you moving everything?" she asked. "Rain. It's supposed to pass. The aisle is mud. The bride wanted the trees. The bride also wanted her dress clean." Shelby stepped outside, checked the sky, then came back in. "Did you ask her?" "Yes." "What did she say?" "She said to use the covered setup." Shelby's face tightened. "You should have included me. You weren't answering your phone. I was with the photographer. You were in his pictures. He needed content for the venue." A gust pushed rain through the open doors. I pulled one closed. "Can we discuss this after the ceremony?" She looked around at the chairs. "You always make decisions before anyone else gets a chance." I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "The guests arrive in 40 minutes. The ceremony went well. The rain became heavy halfway through, drumming against the roof while the couple said their vows. Nobody got wet. The bride hugged me afterward and said the covered setup felt intimate. Mom heard her. Later, near the kitchen, Mom squeezed my shoulder. "Good call on the chairs." I waited. She smiled. "You always know what to do." There it was again. I carried that sentence into Sunday dinner. Shelby arrived 30 minutes late with a bottle of wine and no contract. Mom served chicken, potatoes, and green beans. Dad asked about the weather. Shelby showed him photographs from the wedding. I waited until everyone had food. "Did you bring the cabin option?" Shelby kept cutting her chicken. "I forgot. I texted you this morning. I know, I was busy." "With what?" Mom put down her fork. "Can we eat first? I've been asking since Thursday." Dad reached for the wine. "Cass, it's preliminary. Have you seen it?" He poured too quickly and spilled some beside his glass. I looked it over. "What did the company pay?" Shelby leaned back. "You really can't let this go for one meal?" "I'm trying to understand what we agreed to." "We agreed to hold access to the land beside the north orchard." "What land?" "A neighboring parcel." That was new. I set down my fork. "Who owns it?" Shelby's eyes moved toward Mom. Mom said, "Martin represents the seller. How long is the option?" Shelby took a drink of wine. "Several months." "What happens if you don't complete the purchase?" "We lose the deposit." "How much?" Nobody spoke. Dad wiped the spilled wine with his napkin. Finally, Shelby said, "It's manageable. That isn't a number." Mom's chair shifted. "You're making this hostile. I've asked the same question for 3 days." "And maybe there's a reason nobody wants to answer you," Shelby said. "What reason?" "Because you act like we need permission to have an idea. You spent company money. You spend company money every week on payroll and supplies. Still money." Dad raised one hand. "Enough." Shelby looked at him. "No, I'm tired of this. Cassandra thinks because she handles schedules, she gets to judge everything I do. I asked for the contract. You ask like I'm an employee, you caught padding an expense report, then answer the question." She pushed back from the table. $25,000. I didn't speak. That was the first useful answer anyone had given me. The room felt smaller after it landed. "You paid a $25,000 non-refundable deposit?" I asked. "It secured the option. Before financing?" "We're working on financing. With whom?" Mom stood and started gathering plates that still had food on them. "We are not discussing lender details tonight." "Why not?" "Because your sister has worked hard on this." "I didn't say she hadn't." "You don't have to," Shelby said. Dad stared at his plate. I waited for him to say I had a right to know. He didn't. Mom carried the plates into the kitchen. Shelby followed her with the wine. Dad asked if I wanted coffee. That was his peace offering. I said no. On the drive home, I kept hearing Mom say they counted on me. I had spent years treating that as proof I belonged in the center of the family. I thought if I solved enough problems, they would eventually see me as more than the person standing nearby with a toolkit and an extra copy of the schedule. But I had helped teach them the pattern. They called, and I came. They forgot, and I remembered. They promised, and I delivered. Then I accepted gratitude as if it were respect. When I reached my apartment, I didn't take off my coat. I went straight to the kitchen table, opened the operating agreement again, and began reading from the first page I had skipped. The section on company records was clearer than I expected. Each voting member had the right to review financial statements, contracts, and business records connected to company decisions. I read that paragraph 3 times, then marked it with a yellow note. I kept going until 1 a.m. There were sections about management, distributions, taxes, insurance, and what happened if a member wanted to transfer an interest. I understood most of it, but I wasn't looking for a legal weapon. I wanted to know whether my family could spend that kind of money while refusing to show me the contract. The agreement said I could review it. That was enough for one night. On Monday morning, I sent an email to Shelby, Mom, and Dad. I'm requesting a copy of the cabin option contract, the current development budget, and any financing materials already submitted. Please have them available in the office by Wednesday. I included the section number from the agreement. My finger hovered over the send button. Usually I would have softened it. I would have added something about wanting to help or making sure operations could support the project. I almost wrote, "I'm sure everything is fine." I deleted that sentence before sending the email. Shelby called 4 minutes later. "What is this?" "I think it's fairly clear. You sent Mom a records demand? I sent all 3 of you a request. You quoted the operating agreement. Yes, why? Because you haven't shown me the contract? We had dinner last night, and you forgot it. I said I forgot it. So I'm reminding you in writing." She lowered her voice. "Are you trying to create some kind of paper trail?" I looked at my sent folder. "No, I'm trying to get a document. You know what I mean. I don't." She didn't answer. I could hear the turn signal in her car. Finally, she said, "I have a full day." "So do I. You don't need every piece of paper the second you ask for it." "Wednesday isn't this second." She hung up. At 10, Mom came into my office. She closed the door behind her, which told me she didn't want staff hearing us. "You upset your sister. I asked for business records. You could have spoken to her. I spoke to her Thursday and Sunday. She's under pressure." "From what?" Mom took the chair across from my desk. "She's trying to prove she can do this." I waited. Mom leaned forward. "You know how hard it is to take on a leadership position when people are waiting for you to fail. Who's waiting for her to fail? You're very critical. Is asking what she spent now considered criticism? It's the way you ask. How should I ask? Like her sister?" I did. She wouldn't answer. Mom looked at the printer, then at the stacks of event folders on my desk. There are ways families handle these things. Apparently, our way is to avoid them. That isn't fair. I turned my monitor slightly and showed her the email. "What part is unfair? She barely looked at it. You made it formal. I made it specific. She'll get you the contract. And the budget? If there's a finished budget. The financing materials?" Mom's gaze shifted back to me. "You don't need to attend every early conversation. Is tomorrow's financing review an early conversation?" Her face stayed still. I knew then that she was aware of the calendar entry. "Where is it?" I asked. "You're busy tomorrow. I can move things." "There's no reason to." That's not what I asked. Mom stood. "I'll speak with Shelby." "What time is the review?" "Cassandra." "What time?" She opened the door. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Then she left. I looked at the shared calendar. The entry still said financing review with no location attached. I called our bookkeeper, Lena Price. Lena worked from home most days and came to the venue twice a month. She handled payroll, vendor payments, account coding, and the reports my parents glanced through at quarterly meetings. "Hi, Cass," she said. "Is someone missing a check?" "No. I have a question about the cabin option deposit." There was a brief silence. "All right. Did you process it?" "I recorded it." Which account did it come from? The development reserve. I had never heard of a development reserve. When was that account created? Deborah asked me to separate the funds in September. Where did the money come from? Operating cash. How much was moved? I'd rather send you the report. That's fine. I'm requesting it as a member. Another pause. I know. Her voice had changed. Lena wasn't nervous exactly. She was choosing each word. Was the $25,000 the only payment? I asked. It's the only completed payment I've recorded. Completed? There was another invoice entered, then removed before payment. For what? I don't have supporting documents. Who entered it? Shelby. I picked up a pen. What was the amount? $8,600. What was the vendor? It said development consulting. Did it name the consultant? No. Why was it removed? You'll need to ask Shelby. I wrote the amount beneath Martin's phone number. Has anyone submitted financial statements to a lender? Lena took a breath. I sent 3 years of company statements to River Valley Credit Union last week. That was the inconsistency I needed confirmed. This wasn't an idea. It wasn't a possible future project. Shelby had paid for an option and sent our financial records to a lender. Who authorized you? I asked. Deborah. Did the credit union ask for member information? They asked for the current company structure. I sent the membership schedule. So my name was included, yes. Did they ask for anything from me? Not yet. The words stayed with me. Not yet. Can you send me the development reserve report and the request from the credit union? Yes. Today? Yes. Thank you. Before we ended the call, Lena said, Cass, I'm here. I assumed you were part of the planning. It was one useful sentence. She didn't apologize for making the assumption, and I didn't blame her for it. So did I said. The report arrived 20 minutes later. Mom had moved $40,000 from operating cash into the new reserve. The deposit came out 3 days after Shelby became managing director. There was no written budget attached. The credit union email requested company statements, ownership information, current debt, and projected revenue from the cabin expansion. It also confirmed a meeting on Tuesday at 10:30. The meeting was at the branch on Baker Street. Shelby had removed the location from our shared calendar. I printed both emails and placed them in my work bag. Then I moved a staff training session to the afternoon and asked my assistant coordinator to handle a linen delivery. I didn't ask my mother whether I could attend. Tuesday morning, I arrived at the credit union at 10:20. It was a small branch with gray carpet, 2 teller windows, and a coffee machine beside a rack of mortgage brochures. Mom and Dad were sitting in the waiting area. Shelby stood near the front windows with a leather folder under her arm. All 3 of them saw me at the same time. Dad looked surprised. Mom looked irritated. Shelby walked toward me. What are you doing here? I'm attending the financing review. You weren't invited. I'm a voting member. The credit union has my information. Her eyes flicked toward Mom. Mom stood. Can we talk outside? No. A teller glanced over, then looked back at her screen. I kept my voice low. I won't make a scene. I'm here to understand what the company is requesting. Shelby held the folder tighter. This is an initial discussion. Then it shouldn't be a problem. A man came through a door beside the teller counter. Lawson Party. He wore a blue shirt with the sleeves buttoned at his wrists. He looked at the 4 of us. Shelby smiled immediately. Yes. Hi, Daniel. She introduced Mom and Dad, then hesitated. I held out my hand. Cassandra Lawson. I'm a voting member and operations director. His expression shifted into professional attention. Of course. I saw your name on the company schedule. Shelby's smile remained in place. Daniel led us into a conference room. There were 6 chairs, a wall-mounted screen, and a glass bowl filled with peppermints. Shelby sat beside him. Mom and Dad took the opposite side. I sat at the end of the table and opened my notebook. Daniel pulled up a file. I want to start with the project amount and the information we still need. The current request is for $480,000. I stopped writing for a moment. Nobody in my family looked at me. Daniel continued. The funds would cover the neighboring parcel, site work, utility connections, and the first phase of cabin construction. How many cabins? I asked. Shelby answered before he could. 6. At Sunday dinner, she had said cabins as if the number didn't exist yet. Daniel looked at his notes. The initial plan shows 6 units and a shared service building. Has the county reviewed that? I asked. We're not at county approval, Shelby said. Daniel nodded. Land use and permitting would be conditions before full disbursement. I wrote that down. What security is proposed? I asked. Shelby turned toward me. We're not discussing every loan detail today. Daniel looked between us. We're still reviewing the full structure. That wasn't an answer, but I let it sit. He moved to the projections. The larger concern right now is repayment capacity. The revenue forecast shows all 6 cabins operating at 75% occupancy during the first full year. Shelby nodded. Our wedding clients are already asking for lodging. Do we have deposits? I asked. Not before construction, she said. Letters of interest? No formal letters. Daniel clicked to the next page. The projection also assumes an average nightly rate of $420. I looked at Shelby. Based on what? Comparable properties? Which ones? She opened her folder but didn't remove anything. There are several, Daniel said. We'll need the comparable rate support included in the revised package. Mom shifted in her chair. How much revision are we talking about? The current forecast doesn't cover the proposed debt with enough margin. We need a more conservative model. Dad leaned back. Does that mean the loan won't work? It means these projections don't support it yet. Shelby sat straighter. I can adjust them. Daniel looked at her. We need operating expenses tied to your actual venue costs. Staffing, cleaning, insurance, utilities, maintenance, booking patterns, and seasonality. Every item he named came from my side of the business. Shelby knew that too. She glanced at me. I kept my pen over the notebook. Daniel continued. The option expires in several months, but the project timeline is already tight. If you want a decision before the option deadline, we should have revised projections within 3 weeks. Mom turned to me. Cassandra can do that. She said it without asking. Daniel looked my way. Do you handle the operating figures? I handle the actual figures, I said. I didn't prepare this forecast. Shelby's face reddened. Mom gave me a warning look. Daniel only nodded. That's helpful. We need the person who understands the existing operation involved in the revision. For the first time in that room, my competence had been stated as a reason for access, not a reason to clean up afterward. It felt better than it should have. Then Shelby slid a copy of the forecast toward me. Fine, she said. Tell us what you think is wrong. I read the first page. The cabin income was aggressive, but that wasn't the worst part. Payroll assumed 1 part-time housekeeper for all 6 units. There was almost nothing for repairs. Snow removal was listed, even though McMinnville rarely needed it, but septic maintenance wasn't listed at all. The projected utility cost was lower than what the tasting room already paid. I turned the page. Where did these numbers come from? Shelby crossed her arms. I worked with estimates. From contractors? Some. Which ones? She looked at Daniel. Can we focus on what needs changing? I kept reading. The forecast assumed cabin guests would create no additional workload for venue staff. It also counted wedding package revenue increases without adding service costs. I reached the last page. Did you use our best year as the base year? Shelby said, it was our most relevant year. It was the year we had 3 unusually large corporate events. We're targeting premium bookings. But those events aren't recurring. Mom spoke before Shelby could. This is why we need you to refine it. Refine meant make believable. I closed the forecast. I can rebuild the operating side. Shelby looked relieved. I knew you could, but I need everything. Contractor estimates, purchase terms, insurance quotes, site plans, and the complete option contract. Her relief disappeared. You don't need the entire contract to calculate housekeeping. I need to know what the project actually includes. Daniel said a complete package would help. Shelby pressed her lips together. Dad looked at her. Give her the documents. She nodded once. Fine. My deliberate move had worked. I was in the room. I knew the request amount, the project size, and the deadline. I also knew the lender had already rejected the numbers Shelby wanted everyone to trust. But the meeting gave my family something too. They now had a problem with a 3-week deadline, and everyone at that table had just watched me agree to fix it. I started with the expenses because those were real. I pulled payroll reports, utility bills, cleaning invoices, repair logs, insurance statements, and booking records. I separated event costs from property costs and built a monthly estimate for the cabins. The numbers didn't improve. Even with generous occupancy, 6 cabins needed more staff than Shelby had included. They needed laundry service, guest support, supplies, repairs, booking fees, and higher insurance. The North Orchard also needed drainage work before anyone built near it. By Wednesday afternoon, I had reduced the projected cabin income and more than doubled the operating expenses. Shelby came into my office while I was working. "How bad is it?" she asked. "The first year loses money." She closed the door. "You need to account for premium packages." I did. The packages will increase wedding revenue. Only if people buy them, they will. Then show me how many couples asked for them. She sat across from me. "We have interest? Emails, conversations? With booked clients? Some. How many?" She rubbed her forehead. "Why are you trying to kill this? I'm trying to calculate it. You always say no first." I said yes when Mom asked if I could rebuild the forecast. You know what I mean. I turned the monitor toward her. "Look at the housekeeping line." She glanced at it. "That's too high. It's based on actual local rates. We can use venue staff. Our venue staff work events. Not every day. They're hourly. You can't keep them available all week without paying them. We'll work out a schedule. That costs money." She pushed the keyboard away as if it were blocking her view. "Can you make the project work or not? I can make the forecast accurate. That isn't what I asked. It's the only thing I agreed to do." Shelby stood and opened the door. As she left, she said, "Mom was right. You don't understand growth. I kept working." By Friday, she still hadn't given me the option contract. I sent another email. She replied that the complete project file was available in her office and that I should review it there because some materials were confidential. Her office had once been Mom's. It faced the orchard and had 2 tall windows, built-in shelves, and enough room for a meeting table. Mine faced the service driveway and shook whenever a delivery truck passed. Shelby had filled the shelves with sample candles, fabric books, and framed photographs of herself at events. The project file was in the bottom drawer of her desk. I sat in her chair and opened it. The option contract was on top. It gave the company the exclusive right to purchase a narrow parcel beside the North Orchard for a fixed price. The $25,000 deposit was non-refundable. If the purchase didn't close before the option expired, the seller kept the money. I checked the expiration date. There was less time than Shelby had suggested at the credit union. The option expired in early August. Financing approval, appraisal, county review, and closing all had to happen before then, unless the seller granted an extension. I photographed the page. Behind the option contract were contractor estimates, a rough site sketch, and printed emails between Shelby and a cabin supplier. The estimates didn't include drainage, utility trenching, or permits. The final section contained the financing draft. I expected a request secured by the new parcel in the cabins. That wasn't what I found. The collateral description named the entire Orchard House property, the farmhouse, the event barn, the tasting room, the orchard. Everything at 418 Aldercrest Road. I read the page twice. Then I walked to the copier and made a copy. Shelby appeared in the doorway while the machine was running. "What are you copying?" "The collateral page." "Why?" "Because the loan is secured by Orchard House." She leaned against the doorframe. "That's normal. You told me the loan structure hadn't been decided. It's a draft. You submitted it to the credit union. They need collateral. The neighboring parcel is collateral. It isn't worth enough. Then the cabins aren't standing on their own." She walked into the room and lowered her voice. Businesses borrow against property all the time, not without discussing it with every owner. You're not an owner. The copier stopped. I looked at her. She corrected herself. You're a member. You know what I meant. I'm not sure I do. Mom and Dad own the property. The company owns it. They created the company. And I contributed $60,000 to it. She crossed her arms. You've gotten that back in salary. No, salary paid me for working. I'm just saying you act like you bought the orchard. I'm saying you want to mortgage it. For a project that benefits all of us, a project you haven't shown can pay for itself. That's because you cut the revenue. I corrected it. She reached for the copier tray. I took the page first. Don't be dramatic, she said. I'm going to confirm this with Daniel. Her face tightened. You don't need to call him every time you find language you don't understand. I understand the address. I returned the original to the file and walked out. Daniel didn't answer, so I sent him an email asking one question. Does the current loan request use the existing Orchard House property as collateral? He replied an hour later. Yes. Based on the current proposed structure, the credit union would require a lien against the company's existing real estate. Final terms remain subject to approval and member authorization. Member authorization. I printed his response and added it to my copy of the financing page. That evening, I returned to the operating agreement. I read slowly this time. The section I needed wasn't under loans. It was under restrictions on company authority. Most company decisions could be made by the managers or by a majority of voting interests. Then I reached the exceptions. The company could not sell, transfer, or encumber its real estate without unanimous written consent from every voting member. I knew what encumber meant in that sentence. It meant placing a claim on the property, a mortgage. The loan couldn't close without all of us agreeing in writing. I checked the signature page again. My name was there. I checked the membership schedule. My name was there too. I wasn't the employee standing outside the meeting anymore. On this decision, my consent carried the same necessity as theirs. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. If my family had shown me the project before paying the deposit, I might have helped them build a smaller plan. If Shelby had asked for honest numbers, I might have spent months making it workable. Instead, they had hidden the commitment, hidden the meeting, and expected me to repair the forecast after the lender rejected it. Now they also expected me to risk the venue without authority over the project. I placed 3 yellow notes in the agreement, closed it, and returned it to the file box. The following Monday, I asked for a family meeting. Mom scheduled it for 8 in the morning before staff arrived. Shelby came in carrying the revised forecast I'd sent the night before. She dropped it on the table. This won't get approved. It reflects the actual costs. It makes the project look terrible. The project makes the project look terrible. Dad looked at the first page. Is there a version that works? Yes, I said. Shelby sat down. I knew it. A smaller first phase. 2 cabins instead of 6. No service building. We wait on the neighboring parcel until we have county feedback. We fund preliminary work without mortgaging the existing venue. Shelby's expression went flat. That isn't the concept. It's a version the business can carry. 2 cabins won't create a destination. They'll tell us whether guests will pay the rate you're projecting. Mom turned to me. Daniel asked for a 6-cabin model. Because that's what Shelby presented. We've already paid for the option, Dad said. That doesn't make the larger plan affordable. Shelby opened my forecast. You included a management salary. Yes. For whom? For whoever manages lodging operations. I'll manage it. Then you need to be paid for that time, and someone else needs to cover your current duties. My current duties aren't in this model. That's part of the problem. Mom leaned back. What do you want, Cassandra? It was the first direct question she had asked. I placed the copy of the collateral page on the table. If Orchard House is being mortgaged, I want equal authority over the project. Shelby laughed once. You want my job? No. I want defined approval over the budget, contracts, and changes that affect the property. That is my job. Then you're asking me to carry equal risk without equal authority. Dad picked up the collateral page. Is this final? It's the structure submitted to the credit union. Mom looked at me. We can't have two people directing one project. You already do. Shelby makes promises and I make them operational. That's unfair, Mom said. Is it inaccurate? She didn't answer. I continued. I also want an independent budget review before any loan closes. Not Shelby's forecast and not mine. Someone outside the family. Shelby pushed her chair back slightly. So now I need supervision. The project needs review. Same thing. And I'm done handling unpaid emergency work outside my position. Mom stared at me. You're salaried. My salary covers operations. It doesn't mean I'm available every night because Shelby missed a vendor call. We all do more than our job descriptions, Mom said. No, I do more than mine, and everyone describes it as being helpful. Dad folded the collateral page. Let's slow down. I am being slow. I've spent a week checking this. Mom's voice hardened. Shelby was appointed to lead development. Then she can lead a project that doesn't require my consent. The room went still. Shelby looked at Mom. Mom's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? I opened my copy of the operating agreement to the marked page and slid it across the table. The company can't mortgage its real estate without unanimous written consent from every voting member. Dad read the paragraph first, then he passed it to Mom. She read it without changing expression. Shelby leaned over her shoulder. This is boilerplate. It's our signed agreement. You're seriously threatening to block the loan? I'm telling you my conditions for considering it. You already rebuilt the forecast. That doesn't mean I approved the loan. Mom closed the agreement. You were brought into this company because we trusted you. I brought $60,000 into this company, and we gave you membership, she said. We did not give you control over Shelby. I'm not asking for control over Shelby. You are asking us to reduce her project, review her work, and place you beside her as an equal. Yes. If the project risks the entire venue. Mom pushed the agreement back toward me. Leadership belongs to Shelby now. That decision has been made. Dad looked at her, then at me. Maybe there's a compromise. I just offered one, I said. Shelby stood. No, you offered to take over. She gathered the forecast and held it against her chest. You've been waiting for a reason to do this. Do what? Punish me for being appointed. I looked at Mom. Is that what you think too? Mom didn't hesitate. I think you're letting jealousy interfere with the future of this family. That was the moment the larger problem became clear. They didn't question my numbers. They didn't dispute the mortgage language. They didn't offer different protections. They simply believed my consent was something they were entitled to, even after refusing every condition attached to it. I put the agreement back in my bag. I won't sign under the current structure. Mom's face went still. You'll reconsider. No. Shelby walked toward the door. We'll see. She said it with complete confidence, as if my refusal were only another operational problem they could hand back to me until I solved it for them. The next morning, Shelby sent me a spreadsheet at 6:48. The subject line said, Quick Fixes. She had highlighted 4 cells in yellow. She wanted me to raise the first-year occupancy, lower payroll, remove the outside management salary, and count the cabin deposit as future revenue. I called her. That last one isn't revenue, I said. It converts into a booking credit. For the client, not for us. It's still money we owe toward their package, but it shows demand. Then we can list it as demand. We can't count it twice. She was quiet for a moment. Daniel said we need stronger numbers. He said we need supportable numbers. Same thing. No. I could hear cupboard doors closing in the background. She was probably at Mom and Dad's house. Shelby still went there for breakfast several times a week. Mom thinks you're being rigid, she said. Mom can call me. She doesn't want another argument. Then don't speak for her. Shelby lowered her voice. Just make the changes and send the forecast. I'm sending the version based on actual costs. That version kills the loan. The loan request is too large. You don't get to make that decision. Neither do you alone. She hung up. I sent the completed forecast to Daniel, Shelby, Mom, and Dad. I attached a note explaining each assumption and offered to answer questions. Daniel replied before lunch. Received. Thank you. We'll review this version as the current operating forecast. That sentence mattered. The accurate numbers were now in the lender's file. Shelby couldn't quietly replace them without explaining why. At 1, Mom called me into the tasting room. Dad and Shelby were already seated at the bar. My forecast lay between them. Mom tapped the first page. You sent this without our approval. I sent the work Daniel requested. You copied him before we discussed it. We discussed it Monday. We discussed your concerns, she said. We did not authorize you to present a reduced forecast. It isn't reduced, it's corrected. Shelby turned on the bar stool. You made sure he called it the current version. I didn't tell him to use those words, but you liked that he did. I looked at her. Yes. Dad rubbed his hands together. Could we send both versions? The credit union already has both, I said. Then maybe Daniel can decide which assumptions are reasonable. That's exactly what will happen. Mom's eyes stayed on me. You've put us in a weaker position. No, the project put us in a weaker position. Do you hear yourself? Shelby asked. You talk about the project like it belongs to strangers. I talk about it like it costs money. It's our future. It's a proposal. Mom turned the forecast around. What would make the full loan work? More cash, lower construction costs, stronger documented demand, or less debt? We don't have more cash, Dad said. I glanced at the development reserve report. We had $40,000 until the option deposit. Shelby's face tightened. Mom said, that decision is finished. The cost isn't. She closed the forecast. Your job now is to help us move forward. My job is to operate the venue, and this is part of the venue. Not yet. Mom stood. We're meeting with a site contractor Thursday. Shelby will handle it. That was meant to sound like I had been relieved of a burden. What it actually meant was that she was excluding the one person who had raised the drainage problem. What time? I asked. You don't need to attend. I need to know if they'll be on the property during an event. There's no event Thursday. There's a corporate tasting at 4. Shelby looked at me. That's in the tasting room. The guests have an orchard walk at 5. The contractor will be gone. What area are they inspecting? The north side. That's the orchard walk. Shelby picked up her phone. I'll tell them to finish by 4. Tell them to finish by 3:30. We need time to remove equipment and check the path. Mom looked from her to me. See? This is what I mean. Every conversation becomes an obstacle. I didn't answer. I returned to my office and updated the event notes. Then I emailed Shelby the access instructions for the contractor. No vehicles through the main guest entrance after 3. No open trenches. No equipment left near the orchard path. She replied with one word. Fine. Thursday morning, I arrived at 7:30 and found 2 orange survey flags beside the service driveway. A pickup truck was parked near the north orchard. Shelby stood beside it with a man in work boots looking at a printed site plan. I walked over. You said the contractor would finish before the tasting. We started early, Shelby said. The man introduced himself as a site estimator. His only job was to examine drainage and access, so I showed him where water collected after heavy rain. He looked at the ground, then at Shelby's plan. These cabin locations are low, he said. Shelby pointed farther uphill. Could we shift them? Maybe. We'd need a drainage study and updated grading plan. What would that cost? I asked. He gave a rough range. It was much higher than the small drainage allowance in Shelby's forecast. Shelby folded her arms. That seems excessive. It depends on what the county requires. I asked him to put the estimate in writing. Shelby said, We're not ready for a formal quote. I need a record for the forecast. It's already conservative enough. The estimator looked between us. I can send a preliminary range, he said. Send it to both of us, I told him. Shelby didn't object in front of him. That was the useful result. The drainage problem wasn't just Cassandra being negative anymore. It now had a cost attached to it. The estimator left shortly after noon. At 3:20, I walked the orchard path myself. His truck had left deep tire marks near the edge, and several survey flags remained in the grass. I pulled the flags and stored them in the maintenance shed. Then I covered the worst tire marks with dry gravel and moved the tasting route several feet east. At 4, the corporate group arrived. They never knew construction planning had taken place there that morning. Shelby joined the orchard walk wearing boots that had never touched mud. When one of the guests complimented the path, she said, "We try to keep the property feeling natural." I kept walking. That evening, the estimator copied me on his preliminary range. Drainage and grading could add between $45,000 and $70,000 before utilities. Shelby replied to him without including me. "Thank you. We'll review internally." He forwarded that response to me because I had requested the estimate. I printed both emails. The next complication arrived through the booking inbox on Friday. A couple getting married the following spring wrote to confirm whether their cabin package included 2 nights or 3. I checked their contract. There was no cabin package. I searched the email history. Shelby had offered them an early reservation in one of the proposed cabins if they upgraded their wedding package. They had paid an additional $5,000 deposit. The agreement promised lodging that did not exist. I called Shelby into my office. She stood in the doorway. "What now?" I turned the monitor toward her. "Did you sell a cabin package?" "It's a future reservation. For next spring. The cabins should be ready. There's no land purchase, permit, financing, or construction schedule." That's why it says, "subject to availability." The email says their cabin is reserved. They understand it's part of the development. Do they understand we haven't been approved? She walked closer and read the email. I explained it on the phone, then put that explanation in writing. She straightened. "You're not contacting them. I'm responsible for their event file. I sold the upgrade. You sold lodging we can't provide. We can refund it if there's a delay. From what account?" "The deposit account. It's already recorded as event income." Her eyes narrowed. "Were you checking my bookings? It came into the shared inbox. You could have forwarded it." "I'm answering it." "No, you're not." She reached for my mouse. I moved it out of her reach. "Shelby." "What?" "We need to correct this today. It doesn't need correcting. They asked whether they have 2 nights or 3. Tell them 2. "In which cabin? We haven't assigned units." "Because there are no units." Her jaw tightened. "You enjoy saying that." "I don't." "You absolutely do." I picked up the phone. "Either you call them with me here, or I send an email explaining the project status." She stared at me. "You can't overrule me. I can prevent an inaccurate promise in an active event file. We're going to build the cabins." Then the corrected terms can say the reservation depends on completed construction and permits. If lodging isn't available 90 days before the wedding, the $5,000 gets refunded. 90 days is too early. They need time to book somewhere else. She looked at the phone, then at me. "Fine." She called the couple on speaker. Her voice changed immediately. "Hi, it's Shelby. Cassandra and I are reviewing your lodging upgrade, and we want to clarify one detail." She made it sound routine. I let her. The couple agreed to the written condition and the refund deadline. I updated the event file and moved their additional deposit into a separate refundable category. When the call ended, Shelby said, "Happy? The file is accurate. You made me sound incompetent." They sounded relieved. "They were fine before you scared them. They contacted us because they were confused." She turned toward the door. "Mom needs to know you're interfering with development clients. They're venue clients. Not anymore." She left before I could ask what that meant. An hour later, I lost access to the cabin planning folder on the company drive. The event folders still worked. Payroll still worked. Vendor accounts still worked. Only development files had disappeared. I called Dad. "Did Shelby remove my access?" "I don't know. Can you check?" He sighed. "Do you really need those files right now?" "I'm updating the lender forecast. Shelby says you finished it. The site estimate changes the costs. She thinks Daniel has enough. He doesn't have the drainage range." Dad went quiet. "How much is it?" I told him. He exhaled slowly. "That's not good." "No." "Let me speak to your mother." "Why not speak to Shelby?" Another silence. "I'll sort it out." He called back 20 minutes later. "Shelby is managing the development files now." "I know. I asked why my access was removed. Your mother thinks fewer people editing them will avoid confusion." "I didn't edit them. I'm just telling you what she said." "Do you agree?" "Cass, I'm trying to keep everyone working together. That isn't an answer." He lowered his voice. "You're pushing pretty hard. The numbers changed, and you made your point. This isn't a point. It's a cost. I know. Then restore my access. I'll talk to them." He ended the call without promising anything. I sat in front of the blank folder screen. My objective changed right there. I'd been trying to make the cabin proposal accurate enough for a rational decision. They had decided accuracy was the threat, so I stopped trying to improve their project. I opened the operations calendar instead and began listing every task I performed that belonged to Shelby's new authority. Every late vendor call, missed approval, staffing gap, and client promise I had quietly repaired. If they wanted separate roles, I was going to give them separate roles. The list reached 4 pages before lunch. I included dates, the original assignment, what had gone wrong, who called me, and how much time the repair took. Most of the entries were small by themselves. Shelby forgot to confirm a bartender. Shelby approved a rental change without updating the floor plan. Shelby promised an early setup before checking staffing. Mom asked me to handle it. Dad said it would only take a minute. The minutes added up to entire days. I separated the tasks into 3 columns: operations, development, and managing director responsibilities. Then I emailed the document to all 3 of them. The message was simple. Since my access to development planning has been removed, I will complete operations duties only. Development and managing director tasks should be directed to Shelby. Mom replied that we would discuss it Monday. On Monday, I arrived at 8 for our regular management meeting. The tasting room door was closed. I could hear voices inside. I checked the calendar. The meeting still showed 8:30. They had started without me. I waited near the bar. At 8:25, the door opened. Lena came out carrying her laptop. She saw me and stopped. "I thought you were off today," she said. "No." Her expression told me she had been given a different explanation. Shelby came out behind her. "Oh," she said. "You're here." The meeting starts at 8:30. We moved it up. When? Last night. I didn't get an update. Mom appeared in the doorway. "That's because this was a finance and development meeting. Lena handles payroll and venue expenses. We needed those numbers for development," Mom said. "So I was excluded from a meeting about numbers I produce." Shelby walked past me. "We used your forecast." I looked at Mom. "Am I still attending the operations meetings? There won't be one today. When is the next one? We're restructuring the schedule." Dad remained inside, gathering papers from the table. He kept his eyes down. Mom folded her arms. "Since you've chosen to limit your involvement, we're respecting that. I limited unpaid emergency work. You removed my access. You've been obstructive. I corrected a client promise and a loan forecast. You embarrassed Shelby in front of the credit union. I answered questions. You told them her project didn't work. The numbers told them that." Shelby returned carrying an empty cardboard box. Mom looked at it, then at me. "There's another change." Shelby set the box on the bar. "She needs the operations office," Mom said. I looked toward the service hallway. "My office? It's the best location for coordinating staff and deliveries. That's why I use it. You said those tasks belong to the managing director." "No. I said managing director tasks belong to the managing director." Mom's mouth tightened. "Don't split words. I'm the operations director. That office contains the active event files. Shelby needs access to them. She already has access. She needs to be physically closer to the daily work." I looked at Shelby. She didn't meet my eyes. "Where am I supposed to work?" I asked. We set up a desk in the records room. The records room was a converted storage space behind the tasting room. It held archived contracts, printer paper, cleaning products, and an old refrigerator that hummed every few minutes. There was no window. Dad finally came out. He looked at the cardboard box. "Maybe we don't have to do this today." Mom turned toward him. It's already decided. He nodded once. That was his entire resistance. I picked up the box. Fine. Shelby followed me down the service hall. You don't have to make it look like an eviction, she said. You brought a box. I thought it would help. I unlocked my office with the brass key on my work ring. 2 staff members were checking a linen delivery nearby. They watched us enter. I started with the desk drawers. I packed my spare phone charger, hand lotion, tea bags, and the framed photograph of the orchard after the first snow. Then I collected my notebooks and the small tool pouch I kept beneath the printer. Shelby sat in the visitor chair. You can leave the vendor binders. They're operations records. They belong to the company. I know. I'm taking them to the records room. I need them here. Then make copies. She leaned back. This is your choice. I stopped packing. No, it isn't. You're the one who sent that email after you removed my access because you were contacting clients behind my back. The client contacted the company. You know what I mean? I placed the photograph in the box. I really don't. When I carried the first load into the records room, the old refrigerator was unplugged and pulled away from the wall. Someone had placed a folding table beside it with a desk chair that didn't match. My computer hadn't been moved. The phone hadn't been connected. There was no lock on the door. That was the professional cost, not just losing a room. Staff could see that my position had been reduced before anyone told them what had changed. Vendors could see it too. Every person who had spent years coming to my office with a problem would now walk into Shelby's. Mom knew exactly what that would communicate. I moved the computer myself. By noon, I had a working phone and enough space to open one event binder at a time. My shoulders hurt from carrying file boxes. Dad appeared in the doorway with a sandwich wrapped in paper. I brought you lunch. I looked at the sandwich, then at him. Did you know about this? He placed it on the table. Your mother mentioned it yesterday, and you agreed? I thought Shelby needed to understand operations better. She could understand operations by doing the work. She will. From my desk. He glanced at the shelves. This room could be fixed up. That isn't the point. I know. Do you? He put his hands in his pockets. Your mother thinks some distance will help. Help what? Everyone calm down. I'm calm. You're refusing to support the loan. That's a business decision. It doesn't feel like one anymore. Because Mom moved my office? He looked toward the hallway. Keep your voice down. I almost smiled. My voice was lower than his. What do you want me to do? I asked. Work with us. I did. I gave you accurate projections and a smaller option. Shelby believes in the full plan. Then Shelby can risk her own property. That property is the family business. It's also my investment. He rubbed his forehead. We're going in circles. No, you keep returning to the same answer because it requires nothing from you. He looked hurt. That still affected me. Even then, I wanted to take the sentence back. Instead, I opened the event binder in front of me. I have work. He left the sandwich on the table and walked away. The first test came that Friday. Shelby had scheduled a private tasting for a corporate holiday party. She had booked the chef but forgotten to schedule service staff. At 3:15, she appeared in the records room. I need Maria and Colin for 2 hours. They're setting the barn for tomorrow's wedding. They can finish afterward. The rental pickup is at 7. They need to check the order before it leaves. I only need them during service. Then who resets the tasting room? You can. No. She stared at me. What do you mean, no? I'm supervising the barn setup and rental count. The tasting is important. Then you should have staffed it. I thought we had people available. The schedule has been posted for 10 days. Can you call someone? You can use the staff contact list. Cass, I kept checking glassware counts. You told everyone development clients belong to you. This is a company event. It's a sales tasting. You scheduled it. You manage it. Her face reddened. You're going to let us look unprofessional to prove a point. I'm going to complete the work already assigned to me. She stood there for several seconds. Then she left. Mom called me 10 minutes later. I didn't answer because I was on the barn floor checking rentals. She called again. Then Dad called. I silenced my phone and finished the count. Shelby handled the tasting with Mom. Dad washed glasses. The chef served the food himself. The prospective client liked the menu, but they asked to reschedule the full venue tour because nobody was available to walk them through the barn. Shelby promised to call them Monday. She forgot. They booked another venue. Mom came into the records room Tuesday morning holding the printed cancellation email. You could have prevented this. I was running a wedding setup. You could have made one call. So could Shelby. She didn't know they were waiting. They emailed her twice. You saw the emails? Yes. And you did nothing. I completed my assigned duties. Mom placed the page on my table. You're hurting the business to punish your sister. No, I'm letting her perform the job you gave her. You don't get to decide when cooperation ends. I do when the cooperation is my labor. She looked around the records room. This attitude is exactly why leadership isn't a good fit for you. I waited for the sentence to hurt. It did, but differently. I no longer wanted her to give me Shelby's title. I no longer wanted the Orchard View office or a public announcement saying I had earned something. I wanted to stop building my life around the hope that my mother might eventually describe me correctly. That was the turn for me. If you know what it feels like to reach that point, leave the word enough in the comments. Mom picked up the cancellation email. We have another tasting Thursday. You'll make sure it's covered. Send me the staffing request. You know what needs to be done. Send it anyway. She walked out. That evening, Dad came to my apartment. He stood in the hallway holding a bottle of wine. I let him in, but I didn't open it. He sat at my kitchen table beside the locked file box. Your mother's upset, he said. I know. Shelby is too. I know that too. We can't keep losing bookings. Then Shelby needs to check her messages. She's managing the cabin project. She wanted both jobs. Dad looked down at his hands. We need you to be flexible until the loan closes. And after? After what? After I sign, do I get equal authority? He didn't answer. Do I get my office back? We can discuss it. Will Mom agree to an independent budget review? She thinks the credit union review is enough. Will Shelby stop selling cabins before they exist? She corrected the contract. Because I made her. Dad leaned back. Why does everything have to be a condition? Because without conditions, nothing changes. He looked toward the living room where my work bag sat beside the sofa. You love that place. I do. Then don't walk away from it over a family disagreement. I watched him for a moment. Tell Mom to restore my access and authority. You know she won't respond well to an ultimatum. Then tell her without calling it one. He shook his head. I'm not getting between you and your mother. You're already between us. You just keep facing my direction. He stood. I came here to make peace. No, you came here to get my labor back. His face went still. Then he picked up the wine and left with it. After the door closed, I sat at the table for a long time. The original goal had been respect inside Orchard House. Then it became equal authority over the cabin project. Neither was enough anymore. Even if they reduced the loan, restored my office, and thanked me in front of every employee, I would still be waiting for the next emergency to erase the boundary. I opened my laptop and searched for venue operations positions outside McMinnville. For the first time, I wasn't looking to see what I was worth. I was looking for a way out. The first listing I saved was for an operations manager at a conference center outside Salem. The salary was higher than mine. The position included health insurance, paid weekends on rotation, and a staff of 12. The description asked for experience with events, property maintenance, vendor contracts, and emergency planning. I had all of that. I still stared at the application for 20 minutes before uploading my resume. Leaving Orchard House had always felt impossible because my work history was tied to my family. I assumed another employer would see a daughter helping her parents, not an operations director running a venue, so I rewrote each line around what I actually did. I managed more than 100 events a year. I supervised staff. I negotiated vendor agreements. I maintained budgets, handled safety plans, resolved client problems, and coordinated the property through storm damage, equipment failures, and staffing shortages. Once it was written plainly, my job looked different. So did I. I applied to 3 positions that night. The following morning, I began building an operations manual at work. We had checklists, but most of them were old and scattered across event folders. The real procedures lived in my head. I created one shared document for opening, closing, deliveries, staffing, weather changes, vendor access, and emergency contacts. Then I assigned responsibilities by position. The assistant coordinator could approve standard rental deliveries. The event lead could make weather moves using written criteria. The bar lead could request emergency inventory without waiting for me. I wasn't giving away authority I needed. I was removing the excuse that every decision required my private phone. Shelby came into the records room while I was updating the closing procedure. "What's that?" "Operations manual. We already have one." "No, we have a binder from 2019. "Why are you rewriting it?" "Because the procedures need to be current." She stepped behind my chair and read over my shoulder. "You're giving the event leads approval rights? Within limits." "That should come through me. You removed me from management planning. I didn't remove you from reporting." I turned around. "If you want changes, put them in writing." Her eyebrows lifted. "Excuse me?" "Send me your requested changes. I'll review anything related to existing operations. You don't tell me how to communicate with you, I just did." She stood there, waiting for me to soften it. I turned back to the screen. By Friday, the opening and closing sections were complete. That weekend gave me the first chance to test them. We had a Saturday wedding with an outdoor ceremony. The forecast showed light rain beginning around 3. The ceremony was scheduled for 4:30. Normally, I would have arrived before sunrise and stayed until the last guest left. Instead, I arrived at 8, completed the property inspection, and met with the event lead and assistant coordinator. I gave them the weather criteria in writing. "If the path is soft at noon, move the chairs under the overhang," I said. "Don't wait for me." The assistant coordinator looked surprised. "You won't be here. I'll be here until 3. After that, you're leading the event. What if the couple pushes back? Show them the radar and give them both safe options. Note their choice in the event file." She nodded. Shelby walked into the barn during the meeting. "Why are you leaving at 3? "My scheduled hours end at 3. You always stay through ceremonies. When I'm the event lead, you're the operations director, and we have an event lead." She looked at the 2 employees. "Can I speak to Cassandra alone?" They stepped outside. Shelby lowered her voice. "Mom expects you to stay. Mom didn't schedule me. You know Saturdays aren't fixed. My hours are fixed when someone else is assigned. What are you doing after 3? That's personal." She laughed. "You don't have plans." I held her gaze. "Then it should be easy for me to make some." At noon, the ground was soft. The assistant coordinator made the weather call without asking me. She spoke to the couple, documented their approval, and directed the staff. The chair move finished 20 minutes faster than usual because everyone knew their task. At 2:30, I checked the barn, kitchen, bar, and service hall. Everything was ready. At 3, I handed the radio to the event lead. Shelby was standing near the tasting room. "You're actually leaving?" "Yes." "What if something happens?" "Call the event lead. What if she can't handle it?" "Then you're the managing director." I walked to my car. My hands shook while I put the key in the ignition. I sat there for a minute, expecting someone to run after me. Nobody did. I drove home, changed clothes, and went to the grocery store. I bought pasta, tomatoes, coffee, and a loaf of bread. Ordinary things. I left my phone in my purse. When I checked it at 6, there were no emergency calls. The wedding had started on time. The next morning, the event lead sent the closing report. The bar count was correct. The rental pickup was ready. One guest had become sick near the orchard path, and the staff had handled it using the procedure I wrote. The venue had functioned without me for several hours because I had prepared people instead of rescuing them. That success was visible. It also bothered my family. Mom called before I finished reading the report. "Where were you yesterday?" "Off work. You left during a wedding. The assigned team handled it. Shelby said you walked out at 3. My shift ended at 3. You don't have shifts. Then we should write one." She went quiet. "You're making everyone anxious." The event went well. That isn't the point. What is? The point is that people need to know they can rely on you. They could rely on the event lead. That's her job. What if there had been a real emergency? Shelby was there. Mom let out a breath. You're enjoying this. No, you want her to fail. I built a manual that helped her team succeed. She says you're withholding information. The manual is on the shared drive. She didn't know where the electrical shutoff was. It's labeled on the utility panel and listed in the emergency section. You could have shown her. I have. More than once. Mom lowered her voice. This coldness isn't like you. I stood at my kitchen window and watched a delivery van stop across the street. You mean the boundaries aren't like me? I mean, family should not have to communicate through manuals and emails. Then family should answer direct questions. She ended the call. On Monday, I found a note taped to my computer. All new procedures require managing director approval. Shelby had signed it. I removed the note, scanned it into the operations file, and sent her the completed manual for review. I gave her 5 business days to respond. She didn't reply. The conference center called that afternoon. The woman on the phone introduced herself as Paula Kent, the general manager. She asked if I could interview Wednesday morning. I checked the event calendar before answering. We had no bookings until the evening. Yes, I said, I can be there at 10. I used a personal day. I told my family I had an appointment and would be unavailable until 2. Nobody asked what kind. The conference center was larger than Orchard House, but less complicated. It had 2 ballrooms, 6 meeting rooms, a commercial kitchen, and landscaped grounds that didn't flood. Paula met me in the lobby and walked me through the property. She didn't ask about family history. She asked what I did when a vendor failed to arrive. I gave her the process. She asked how I handled staff who made repeated scheduling mistakes. First, I make sure the schedule and expectations are clear, I said. Then I document the pattern. If the mistakes continue, I stop placing that person in a role where other employees have to absorb the consequences. The answer sounded pointed to me. Paula only wrote it down. We sat in her office for nearly an hour. She asked why I wanted to leave Orchard House. I had rehearsed several answers. Growth, new environment, broader experience. What I said was, I've built systems that allow the venue to run well. I'm ready to work somewhere those systems are part of the job, not treated as a personal favor. She looked at me for a moment. That makes sense. The relief I felt at those words was immediate. Before I left, she introduced me to the event services director and showed me the operations office. It had 2 desks, a wall calendar, and a cabinet labeled Active Contracts. No candles, no branding samples, no family photographs, just work. Paula called Friday morning and asked me to return for a final interview. The second meeting was shorter. She offered me the position before I reached my car. I asked for the written offer and 2 days to review it. That evening, I read every page at my kitchen table. The start date was set for the Monday after the founders' dinner. I had enough unused personal time to cover several days between positions once I gave notice. The role was clear. The authority matched the responsibilities. Emergency coverage rotated among 4 managers. I signed the offer Saturday morning and sent it from my personal email. Nobody at Orchard House knew. At work, I kept completing my existing duties. I trained the assistant coordinator on vendor approvals. I updated access lists and added current passwords to the company's secure records. I wrote handoff notes without labeling them as handoff notes. The more organized I became, the more suspicious Shelby became. She entered the records room one afternoon and found me showing the assistant coordinator how to close an event file. Why does she need to know that? Shelby asked. Because she works in operations. You've always closed the files. Now she can too. Shelby looked at the folders stacked on the table. Are you planning something? I'm planning for the venue to function. Without you, everyone takes days off. You don't. I do now. She watched me for several seconds. Then she told the assistant coordinator to leave. After the door closed, Shelby said, Mom thinks you're trying to make us panic before the loan deadline. I'm doing my job. You're documenting everything, leaving on time and teaching people your duties. Yes, so you can hold the business hostage. No, A hostage situation requires dependence. I'm reducing it. She didn't like that answer. The next morning, Mom scheduled a special planning meeting for the founders' dinner. My calendar invitation assigned me full responsibility for setup, staffing, vendor coordination, dinner service, and closing. Shelby was listed as host. Attached to the invitation was a note. All management and member attendance required. Important cabin announcement. The dinner was 3 weeks away, the loan still lacked approval, and my consent had not changed. They had finally noticed I was preparing the venue to function without me. Their response was to create one night where they intended to make my presence impossible to withdraw. I opened the attachment. Shelby had built the dinner around the cabin project. The schedule included cocktails in the orchard, a presentation in the barn, dinner, and what she called a future vision announcement. Employees, preferred vendors, local business partners, and several people from the credit union were invited. My name appeared beside operations and expansion readiness. I emailed Shelby and copied Mom and Dad. Remove my name from the cabin presentation. I have not approved the project or the loan. Shelby replied within 2 minutes. You are the operations director. The description is accurate. It says I'm overseeing expansion readiness. You prepared the operating forecast. I corrected the forecast. I'm not overseeing the expansion. Mom responded next. We'll discuss wording at the planning meeting. The meeting took place that Thursday in Shelby's Orchard View office. She had covered the wall with cabin renderings. Each picture showed a small wooden building with black framed windows, a porch, and 2 chairs facing the trees. They looked finished. Nothing on the wall showed drainage trenches, loan payments, permits, or housekeeping costs. Dad stood near the window. Mom sat at the meeting table with a printed guest list. Shelby handed me a schedule. You'll need 6 servers and 2 bartenders, she said. For how many guests? 110. The original dinner count was 70. We expanded it. When? Last week. The kitchen staffing is based on 70. Then update it. I looked through the guest list. Several vendors had +1 invitations. Community partners I rarely saw were attending. The credit union had 4 seats. Why are 4 people coming from River Valley? Mom answered. They've supported Orchard House for years. They hold our checking accounts. That's still support. I looked at Shelby. Is the loan closing happening at the dinner? She didn't answer immediately. Dad turned from the window. It may be convenient to complete the paperwork that afternoon. What paperwork? The loan packet, Mom said. Has the loan been approved? Conditional approval, Shelby said. Based on which forecast? The credit union adjusted the structure. What structure? We'll have final documents soon. I set the schedule on the table. You scheduled a public announcement and loan signing without telling me. We're telling you now, Mom said. Does Daniel know I haven't agreed? He knows all members must attend. That wasn't my question. Shelby sat across from me. You've made your conditions clear, and none of them were accepted. We took your concerns seriously. Did you order an independent budget review? The credit union reviewed the budget. That isn't independent. They're deciding whether to lend money. Dad said, they reduced the first disbursement. Did they reduce the total loan? Nobody answered. I looked at the renderings again. Is it still $480,000? Yes, Shelby said. Secured by the full property? Mom picked up her pen. We're not reopening every issue. Then I'm not signing. She put the pen down. You haven't even seen the final terms. The basic terms haven't changed. The founders' dinner is 3 weeks away, Dad said. We have time. Time for what? He looked toward Mom. She answered. Time for you to remember that this business supports more than one person. That sentence was the first direct threat. My salary came from Orchard House. So did the paychecks of our staff. Several small vendors depended on regular work from us. If the project failed publicly, Shelby had arranged it so everyone would know exactly when it failed. What have you told the guests? I asked. That we're announcing an expansion, Shelby said. You announced it before financing. We're confident. You're using the dinner to pressure me. Mom's eyes hardened. We are using the dinner to celebrate the future your sister created. With property, I'm required to risk. Dad stepped closer to the table. Cass, nobody wants to pressure you, then move the signing to the credit union and cancel the announcement until everyone agrees. Shelby looked at Mom. Mom shook her head. The invitations have gone out. That was the counter step. They had committed publicly before securing my consent. If I refused privately, they could call me unreasonable. If I refused at the dinner, they could point to the guests, the lost deposit, and the family's embarrassment. Either way, the cost belonged to me. I folded the schedule. I'll manage the dinner under my existing duties. Shelby's shoulders relaxed slightly. I knew you would. I won't participate in the cabin presentation, and my work at the dinner does not mean I approve the loan. Mom said, we'll deal with the signature when the packet arrives. No, we're dealing with it now. She stood. You don't dictate the agenda in this office. I looked around. It had been her office before it became Shelby's. Now the renderings covered the walls like a project had already been built. Apparently not, I said. I left with the event schedule. The public announcement reached me 2 days later through a florist. She called about table arrangements, then said, "Congratulations on the cabins. Thank you, but the project isn't final." There was a pause. Oh. Shelby said you were closing financing at the dinner. That hasn't happened. I'm sorry. I assumed everyone had signed off. Most people would. After the call, I checked the Orchard House social media account. Shelby had posted one of the renderings. The caption invited followers to join us as we unveiled the next chapter of the property at the founders' dinner. My name wasn't included, but my title appeared in a list of the leadership team working on the project. The post already had dozens of comments. I took screenshots. Then I emailed Shelby again. Remove my title from the cabin announcement. The current language implies my approval. She didn't respond. An hour later, I could no longer post or edit on the venue's social media account. The caption stayed. At Monday's staff meeting, an event server asked whether the cabins meant more year-round hours. Shelby smiled. That's one of our goals. The server looked at me. When would hiring start? I don't have an approved staffing plan, I said. Shelby's smile disappeared. We're still finalizing details. Another employee asked whether construction would interfere with weddings. I answered that too. No work should begin without a schedule protecting existing events. Mom, who rarely attended staff meetings, stood near the door. We'll share complete information after the dinner, she said. The question stopped. Afterward, she followed me into the service hall. You undermined Shelby. I answered honestly. You could have said the details were coming. They asked me specific questions. You made it sound uncertain. It is uncertain. Mom stepped closer. Do you understand what happens if you keep doing this? What happens? People lose confidence. In the project? In you. I held the staff folder against my side. Because I won't lie to employees. Because you're allowing a personal grievance to affect your work. My work is why they asked me. You're not the only person who understands this venue. I know. She seemed surprised by the answer. I continued. That's why I wrote the manual. That's why I trained the event lead. That's why I'm completing every active file. Her eyes narrowed. You sound like someone preparing to leave. My hand tightened on the folder. She had noticed the preparation, but she didn't know about the offer. I sound like someone who doesn't want the business dependent on one person. It never was. Then my refusal shouldn't threaten it. She walked away without answering. That afternoon, Daniel sent the revised loan summary to all 4 members. The amount remained $480,000. The entire Orchard House property remained collateral. The credit union had reduced its first release of construction funds and added conditions for permits and site review. The signature deadline was 5 in the afternoon on Founders Dinner Day. A closing officer would bring the loan packet to the venue at 3:30. Every voting member had to sign the same authorization page before the deadline. Daniel included one additional sentence. If unanimous member authorization is not received by 5, the closing appointment will be canceled and the current approval will expire. There was no mention of the public announcement. I printed the email and placed it with the operating agreement. Dad called that evening. Did you see Daniel's message? Yes. The approval expires if we miss the deadline. I read it. The option deadline is too close to restart. I know. We'll lose the deposit. Yes. He went silent. I sat at my kitchen table with the signed job offer closed beside me. Say what you called to say, I told him. We need your signature. You need my agreement. Fine, we need your agreement. My conditions haven't changed. Your mother isn't going to put you over Shelby. I asked for equal authority over the risk. She sees that as the same thing. That's her choice. And losing $25,000 is yours? No. Paying it before financing was Shelby's choice. Dad's voice sharpened. You're not blameless here? I didn't say I was. You helped build the lender package. I gave them accurate numbers. You knew we were relying on you. You were relying on me to agree after you committed. He took a breath. If this falls apart at the dinner, your mother may not forgive you. There it was. Not the business, not the staff, not the property. My mother's forgiveness for a decision she had created. Will you? I asked. He didn't answer. Dad? I don't know what this family looks like after that. I looked at the brass office key on my work ring. I had carried it for 9 years. It opened the office that no longer belonged to me. Neither do I said. He ended the call. The next morning, I received a printed letter from Mom. It stated that refusing reasonable cooperation with approved company financing could affect my future role at Orchard House. She signed it as co-founder. I read it in the records room while the old refrigerator hummed beside me. Then I scanned it, saved it with my employment records, and placed the original in my bag. They had made the price clear. If I used the one vote they had given me when they needed my money, I could lose my place in the business, my relationship with Mom, and possibly Dad too. I opened Daniel's email and replied to everyone. I will attend the closing appointment and the founder's dinner. My attendance should not be represented as consent. Then I returned to the dinner schedule and finished planning an event that might be my last night at Orchard House. 2 days before the dinner, the closing officer called me. Her name was Elaine Porter. She said she was confirming identification requirements and the signing schedule. I need to ask you something before I confirm, I said. Of course. If one voting member does not sign the consent page, can the loan still close? No. She answered without hesitation. Can the other members sign and leave my consent pending? They can sign their portions, but we can't fund or record the loan without unanimous authorization. Could the company replace the consent page with a manager resolution? Not under the operating agreement we reviewed. I looked at my copy on the kitchen table. So the requirement comes from our agreement. Yes, your agreement requires every voting member to approve a lien on company real estate. Our loan conditions also require that authorization. What happens at 5 if one signature is missing? The closing appointment ends. The packet returns to the branch and the current approval expires. Would there be another extension? That would be a new credit decision. I can't promise one. And the option deadline? That's between your company and the property seller. She sounded careful, not curious. I asked one last question. Has anyone told you I've agreed to sign? There was a pause. I was told all members would be present. That isn't what I asked. No, I don't have written confirmation from you. Good, I'll be present. I haven't agreed. I'll note that. She didn't ask why. She didn't advise me. She confirmed the rule and removed the last uncertainty. My signature wasn't ceremonial. Without it, there was no mortgage. After the call, I read the option contract again. The deposit was non-refundable. The expiration date was fixed. There was a short provision allowing an extension if both sides agreed in writing, but no extension had been signed. I called Martin Hale. I'm reviewing the option deadline, I said. Has the seller agreed to extend it? No. Has anyone requested an extension? Shelby asked whether one might be possible. What was the response? The seller would consider a short extension for an additional payment. Has that payment been approved? Not that I know of. How much? I should discuss that with Shelby. That's fine. I only need to confirm there is no current extension. There isn't. Thank you. That closed the smaller question. If the loan failed, Shelby would lose the existing option unless she found new financing or paid for more time. There was no hidden grace period waiting behind the dinner. I could have stopped there. Instead, I checked the dinner budget, staffing schedule, vendor confirmations, kitchen order, guest list, and weather plan. I made sure every employee knew when to arrive and who would release them. I confirmed that payroll had enough cash for the event staff. The business would not fail that night because I had withheld ordinary work. If it failed, it would fail on the decision my family had refused to make honestly. Shelby tried twice to pull me into the presentation. The first time, she sent me a draft slide titled, Operations Ready. It listed housekeeping capacity, staffing flexibility, and existing vendor support. None of those claims were supported. I returned it with comments. Housekeeping capacity is not established. No staffing plan is approved. Existing vendors have not agreed to cabin services. She called me immediately. I asked for edits, not objections. Those are the edits. I need replacement language. Remove the slide. We need to show the credit union we're prepared. The credit union has the forecast. This isn't for them. Then who is it for? The guests. Why do guests need to believe operations are ready? Because it's an announcement. I leaned back from my desk. Shelby, I'm not helping you present an unapproved project as finished. It isn't unapproved. I haven't approved it. You don't control the presentation. No. I control whether my work and title are used in it. She went quiet. Then she said, You really want everyone to know you're the problem. I want the slide removed. She hung up. The slide disappeared from the next version. That was a small win, but it also made my absence obvious. The presentation named Mom, Dad, Shelby, the cabin supplier, and the proposed design team. It didn't name the person responsible for operating the existing venue. Shelby sent the revised deck to the family. Mom replied, This feels incomplete. Shelby wrote, Cassandra requested removal. Dad didn't respond. The second attempt came the night before the dinner. Mom found me in the barn checking table spacing. The tables were arranged in long rows beneath the string lights. At the front, Shelby had placed a projection screen beside a wooden model of one cabin. Mom stood near the aisle. Shelby needs you to say a few words after her presentation. No, just explain how the cabins will integrate with events. I don't know that they will. You built the operating plan. I built a forecast. You can speak for 2 minutes. I won't endorse the project. Mom walked closer. You don't have to endorse it. Talk about guest experience. That would sound like endorsement. You are determined to make this ugly. I adjusted a chair that was too close to the aisle. I'm doing everything required for the dinner, except supporting your family. I'm staffing the event, confirming vendors, checking the kitchen, and managing the building. You know that isn't what I mean. I do. She looked at the cabin model. Your father barely slept last night. I'm sorry. Are you? Yes. But you still plan to refuse. My conditions haven't been accepted because they would humiliate Shelby. An independent review would humiliate her. Putting you beside her would. I stopped moving chairs. You think equality with me is humiliating for her. That is not what I said. It's exactly what you said. Mom's face tightened. You twist everything. I waited. She looked away first. You've always resented how easy things come to Shelby. Things come easily because you put me behind her to catch them. Her eyes returned to mine. I'm asking you one last time. Say a few supportive words tomorrow. Sign the packet. Then we can start repairing this. Repair starts before the signature. Not if you keep holding it over us. It's the only reason you're talking to me. Mom stepped back. For a moment, I thought she might say something honest. Instead, she said, Be here by 9. I'm scheduled at 9. She left through the side door. I stayed in the barn after everyone else went home. The orchard doors were closed, and the only light came from the fixtures above the service hall. The cabin model sat alone near the screen. I walked to the front table where Elaine would place the loan packet. In my head, I rehearsed every version of what I might say. I could list the calls I had answered for Shelby. I could explain the office move. I could describe the furniture delivery, the inaccurate forecast, the cabin promise, the lost client, and the threat letter. I could tell 110 people exactly how my family treated me. That would hurt them. It would also turn employees and vendors into an audience for every private injury I had carried since childhood. The loan did not require that. My resignation did not require that either. I decided not to make the dinner a trial. The only public facts I would use were the facts connected to the public request. The property was being mortgaged. My consent was required. I had been denied authority over the project. I would not sign, nothing more. I said the words once in the empty barn. I don't consent to the loan. My voice sounded ordinary. That was better. I straightened the closing table and turned off the remaining lights. At home, I packed a small folder. It contained the operating agreement, the collateral page, Daniel's email, the accurate forecast, and Mom's letter about my future role. The agreement was the only leverage. The other pages only showed why I was willing to use it. I also printed my resignation letter. I dated it for the morning after the dinner. It stated that I was leaving the operations director position and would provide written transition support during my remaining paid time. It did not mention the cabin project or my family. I signed it and placed it in a separate envelope. Then I removed the Orchard House key ring from my purse. There were 6 keys on it: the front gate, barn, tasting room, storage shed, utility cabinet, and my brass office key. Only the brass key belonged to me personally. Dad had given it to me when I became operations director. It was heavier than the others and had a small apple stamped near the top. I took the company keys off the ring and placed them in an envelope for the next morning. I left the brass key attached. I wasn't ready to put it down yet. Before bed, I checked the staff schedule one last time. Everyone had confirmed. The caterer had the final guest count. The rental company had delivered the extra chairs. Rain was unlikely. At 7 the next morning, Shelby emailed the family. The closing officer will arrive at 3:30. We'll sign before guests enter the barn. Announcement begins at 4:45, allowing 15 minutes before the lending deadline. She had arranged the evening so the public promise ended just before 5. I replied only to confirm that dinner operations were ready. Then I drove to Orchard House with the 2 folders in my bag. The family packet could protect the property. The resignation envelope would end my daily place in it. By the time I turned onto Aldercrest Road, I had accepted that using one meant eventually handing over the other. I parked behind the service building at 8:45. The caterer arrived at 9. Rentals came at 9:30. By noon, the barn was set, the tasting room was stocked, and the staff had their assignments. I moved through the property with a clipboard. The orchard path was dry. The microphones worked. The projector displayed Shelby's cabin rendering without cutting off the bottom edge. Every table had water glasses, folded napkins, and printed menus. I didn't touch the loan folder in my bag. At 1, Shelby came into the barn wearing a blue dress and carrying a garment bag for Mom. "Did you see my email?" she asked. "Yes." "Elaine needs everyone in the office at 3:30. I'll be there." "You brought identification?" "Yes." She watched me check the table numbers. "Are you going to sign?" My answer hasn't changed. Her fingers tightened around the garment bag. "Then why are you letting us do all this? I told you not to announce the project. You planned the dinner. I planned the event you assigned me. That's the same thing." "No." She stepped closer. "You're going to wait until everyone is here and humiliate me. The closing is scheduled before the presentation. Then sign before the presentation." "I won't." Her face changed. For once, there was no confidence behind the irritation. "Mom said you would." "Mom didn't ask me. She's been asking you for weeks. She's been telling me what I'll do." Shelby looked toward the screen. "The deposit is gone if you block this." "I know. $25,000. I know the amount. That's company money. So is the property." She lowered her voice. "You won't have a job after this." I clipped the dinner schedule to my board. "That isn't your decision alone. It will be Mom's. I know. The answer unsettled her more than an argument would have. She left with the garment bag. At 3:15, I checked the staff one last time. The event lead had dinner service. The assistant coordinator had vendor questions and closing duties. The bar lead had the guest count and inventory sheet. They didn't need me to stand over them. At 3:30, Elaine arrived carrying a black case and a thick cream-colored packet. Daniel came with her but stayed near the tasting room to greet Mom and Dad. Elaine asked for a private table, so Shelby took her into the Orchard View office. I followed with my folder. Mom and Dad were already seated. Shelby stood beside the windows. Elaine placed the loan packet on the table. I'll review the final terms, then I'll need identification and signatures from each voting member. She explained the amount, interest rate, repayment schedule, and conditions. The loan was still $480,000. The company property at 418 Aldercrest Road secured it. Nothing important had changed. Mom signed the member authorization first. Dad signed next. Shelby signed with the same quick slash she used on delivery forms. Elaine turned the consent page toward me. I read it. The page authorized the company to place a mortgage against Orchard House. All 4 names were printed beneath the statement. 3 signature lines were complete. Mine was blank. "I'm not signing," I said. Elaine nodded and turned the page back toward herself. Mom leaned forward. "We're going to take a few minutes." "That's fine," Elaine said. "I'll remain available until 5. She gathered the packet and left the office. The door closed behind her. Shelby stared at me. "You let us sign first. You chose to sign. You could have stopped us. I told you I wouldn't consent." Mom stood. "This has gone far enough. I agree. You're signing that page." "No." Dad remained seated. "Cass, please. We can revise the management arrangement after closing. Put the revision in writing now." Mom's face reddened. "We don't have time for this. You had 3 weeks." Shelby walked around the table. "What do you want me to say? That you were right?" "Fine. You were right about some expenses. We'll deal with them. I want authority over decisions that risk the property. You want my position." "No, I'm leaving my position." The words almost came out. I stopped before finishing the thought and changed it. "I'm leaving this room. Guests are arriving." None of them caught the correction. Dad stood. "Wait." I paused at the door. He looked at Mom. "Maybe we should delay the announcement." Shelby turned on him. "No. People are already here." "That doesn't mean we have to announce financing. Daniel is here." "Daniel knows the packet isn't complete." Mom shook her head. "We are not backing away now. Cassandra will sign before 5. She said it as if certainty could replace consent. I opened the door. Elaine was waiting near the tasting bar. She looked at me, then at the office behind me. "I'll check back after the presentation," she said. That wasn't the schedule we had received, but I understood what had happened. My family had asked her to wait. At 4, guests began entering the barn. Employees came in through the service hall after changing clothes. Vendors stood near the bar. Local business owners took seats close to the front. The florist, who had congratulated me, waved when she saw me. I checked coats, seating, and the microphone. Several people asked about the cabins. "We'll hear the announcement soon," I said. It was the only accurate response I could give. Mom moved through the room, greeting guests. Dad stayed near the credit union table. Shelby stood beside the cabin model, smiling for photographs. At 4:40, the event lead asked if we should begin seating late arrivals. "Yes," I said. "Close the orchard doors at 4:45. She handled it. I stood at the back of the barn. Shelby walked to the microphone. "Thank you all for being here." The room settled. She spoke about the history of Orchard House. She thanked Mom and Dad for starting it. She talked about couples who returned for anniversaries and businesses that held the same holiday dinner every year. Then the first cabin image appeared on the screen. For the past several months, we've been developing the next stage of Lawson Orchard House. People turned toward the rendering. Shelby described 6 luxury cabins, overnight wedding packages, orchard weekends, and expanded year-round events. She spoke in the present tense. We are moving forward with the neighboring parcel and the first phase of construction. Applause started near the front. Mom clapped first. Dad joined a second later. I didn't. Shelby smiled at the room. We've secured financing through River Valley Credit Union, and we expect site work to begin after final county review. That was the false version, fully stated in front of everyone. The financing was not secured. The consent page was still blank. I looked at Elaine. She was seated beside Daniel. Her expression didn't change, but she closed the folder in front of her. Shelby continued. She thanked the cabin supplier, the proposed design team, Mom, Dad, and the credit union. Then she said, "We're going to complete the final signatures right here because this project belongs to our family and this community." An employee rolled the closing table toward the front. That had not been on my event schedule. Elaine remained seated for a moment. Then she stood, picked up the loan packet, and walked toward the table. The time on the screen beside the barn doors was 4:52. Mom crossed the room and came to the back where I stood. "Come with me," she said. "No." People nearby heard her. The event lead stopped beside the service hall. Mom lowered her voice, but not enough. "You have made your point. My answer is no. Your sister is standing up there waiting. She shouldn't have announced financing." Mom's mouth tightened. "You're going to ruin this over a title." "It isn't about a title. It has always been about Shelby getting something you wanted." I looked at the front of the room. Shelby held the microphone with both hands. Mom stepped closer. "Sign the page, Cassandra." "No." Then she said it. "You're just the spare daughter. Shelby is the future." The event lead heard her. So did the florist and 2 employees standing near the bar. Nobody moved. I looked at Mom. "If that's true, you chose the wrong person to require." I walked toward the closing table. Mom followed. The room had become quiet by the time I reached the front. Shelby held out one hand. "Cassandra, we need your signature." Elaine opened the packet and placed the consent page on the table. She spoke clearly. "Ms. Lawson, as a voting member, your signature is required for unanimous authorization." The blank line sat beneath the other 3 signatures. For weeks, my family had described me as support, obstruction, jealousy, and a problem to manage. Now every person in the barn could see the simple fact. Shelby's project could not move without me. I looked at Mom. A spare cannot reasonably be expected to mortgage her property interest for a project she is forbidden to govern. Then I looked at Elaine. I do not consent to this loan. Shelby's face lost its color. Mom said, "Cassandra, stop." Elaine checked the clock. It was 4:56. She turned the page slightly. "I need to be clear. If you don't sign by 5, unanimous authorization is missing. The loan cannot close." "I understand." Dad came to the table. "Cass, can we step outside?" "No, just for a minute. We've had weeks." Shelby put down the microphone. "What if we put the budget review in writing? Does that include equal authority?" She looked at Mom. Mom said no. Then my answer is still no. 4:58. Guests shifted in their chairs. Someone near the bar set down a glass. Shelby whispered, "You're doing this to punish me. I'm protecting the existing property. You're costing us the option. You paid the deposit before approval." Dad looked at the clock. "Deborah, give her the authority." Mom's head snapped toward him. No. It was the first time he had asked her directly. It was also too late to make the request sound like principle. 4:59. Elaine placed her hand on the packet. "Ms. Lawson, I won't sign." The clock changed to 5. Elaine closed the folder. Unanimous authorization was not received. The closing cannot proceed. She slid the unsigned consent page into the packet, fastened the cover, and lifted it from the table. Daniel stood and followed her toward the barn doors. Shelby remained beside the cabin model. Mom stared at the empty place where the packet had been. The financing she had announced less than 10 minutes earlier had expired in front of everyone, and for the first time that evening, nobody looked at me like I was the backup. Then the kitchen timer sounded for dinner service. Nobody at the front moved. The event lead looked at me from beside the service door. I gave her a small nod. She opened the doors. Servers entered carrying the first plates. They had been trained to continue unless someone with event authority stopped them. Nobody did. Shelby picked up the microphone. "We're going to take a short break before dinner," she said. "There's a technical issue with the financing schedule." Elaine and Daniel were already crossing the orchard path toward the parking area. It wasn't a technical issue. People knew that. The florist near the bar looked at me, then looked away. Several employees had heard Mom's sentence. Others had watched the closing officer ask for my signature. There was no private version left for my family to create. Mom caught my arm as I stepped away from the table. "Fix this." Her fingers pressed into my sleeve. "I can't. You can call them back." The deadline passed. "Then tell everyone it's delayed. Shelby already did. You know what I mean." I removed her hand from my arm. "No, Mom, I'm not repairing the announcement." Her face was pale beneath her makeup. "You planned this. I warned you in writing. You wanted an audience. I asked you to cancel the announcement." Dad came toward us. "Deborah, let her go." Mom turned on him. "Now you say something?" He flinched. Shelby remained near the cabin model. 2 community partners were asking her questions. She answered in short sentences, then pointed toward the dining tables. Dad looked at me. "Are you leaving?" "Yes. We still have dinner service. The event lead has the schedule. We're short 2 servers. You approved the final staffing count." He glanced toward Mom. She had cut the extra servers after Shelby said the dinner budget was too high. "Can you stay through the main course?" he asked. No. It was the assignment I had accepted for years. "Something failed," Dad asked gently, and I protected him from saying why it was my responsibility. This time, I handed him my clipboard. Table assignments are on the first page. The kitchen has the timing sheet. If service falls behind, reduce the pause before dessert. He took it. "You're really walking out?" "Yes." I went to the records room and picked up my work bag. The resignation envelope was inside. I left it there. I wanted Mom to receive it during business hours, not while she was angry in a room full of guests. I could hear plates moving through the service hall. The assistant coordinator stopped me near the tasting room. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No. Finish your shift. Are you coming back tomorrow?" "Yes." She looked relieved. "I'll be here at 9, I said. That was all I promised. I wasn't there for the rest of dinner, but the closing report showed me what happened. Service ran 34 minutes late. Dad carried water pitchers. Mom reset 2 tables herself after guests moved seats. Shelby helped clear plates when one server became overwhelmed. The event lead followed the manual. The food stayed hot. Payroll was recorded correctly. The caterer was paid. The building was locked after the final guest left. My family handled 1 complete service without calling me back. It wasn't graceful, but it worked. That mattered. They had spent years treating my constant availability like a natural resource. One difficult dinner proved it had always been labor. The social consequences started before I returned the next morning. There were emails from vendors asking whether the expansion was canceled. 2 employees wanted to know whether their schedules would change. A local business owner sent Dad a polite message asking whether the company had announced financing prematurely. Shelby posted a statement saying the cabin project had been delayed due to an internal member issue. I took a screenshot, then I walked into the tasting room at 9. Mom, Dad, and Shelby were waiting. Nobody had changed clothes. Mom wore the same dress beneath a cardigan. Dad's shirt was wrinkled. Shelby had removed her shoes and sat with her feet beneath the chair. I placed my resignation envelope on the table. Mom looked at it. "What is that?" "My notice." Shelby sat upright. Dad opened the envelope. His eyes moved across the page. "You're resigning?" "Yes." "When?" "My last paid day is in 2 weeks. I'll complete written transition work and existing administrative duties. I won't run new events." Mom took the letter from him. "You can't do this now." "I can." "We have 9 weddings on the calendar. The operations manual covers them. The assistant coordinator can manage event files until you hire someone. She isn't qualified to replace you, Mom said. She can handle the work assigned to her. You need an operations manager for the rest. Shelby looked at me. So this was the plan. The job offer came after you moved me out of planning. Mom's head lifted. What job offer? I accepted an operations position outside McMinnville. When? Last week. You hid that from us. It was personal employment information. We are your family. You threatened my job over a member vote. She looked at Dad. Did you know? No, he said. Nobody had known. That was the one decision they hadn't been able to manage before I made it. Shelby crossed her arms. You left us understaffed last night because you already had somewhere else to go. I left after the loan failed because my duties were covered. You humiliated us. You announced an unsigned loan. You knew I would. Yes, I told you not to. Mom placed both hands on the table. Enough. Shelby stopped. Mom looked at me. If you walk away now, don't expect to return when this new job disappoints you. I'm not asking to return. Her face changed. She had expected fear, or at least negotiation. Dad reread the resignation letter. What happens to your membership? Nothing. I'm leaving employment, not transferring my vote. Shelby laughed bitterly. So you get to leave the work and still control us. I control my consent, that's all. You cost the company $25,000. You paid it without financing. You keep saying that like it makes you innocent. It makes me not responsible for the deposit. Mom looked toward the orchard doors. Is the option definitely gone? Dad answered. Martin emailed this morning. The seller won't extend without another payment. How much? $15,000. Shelby looked at him. We could pay it. With what? I asked. She turned toward me. Nobody asked you. Dad rubbed his eyes. We don't have $40,000 to lose on an option. It isn't 40, Shelby said. The first deposit is already gone. That is still money, he said. It was the first time I heard him use my language with her. Shelby stared at him. So you're giving up too? I'm saying we can't pay another deposit without financing. We can find another lender. With the same property requirement, I said. She looked at Mom. Mom didn't defend her. The option expired that week. The seller kept the $25,000. No additional payment was made. The cabin supplier canceled the production hold. The site estimator closed his file. The social media post announcing the project disappeared 2 days later. There was no lawsuit, investigation, or dramatic outside punishment. Shelby had committed company money to a deadline before securing the one approval she needed. When the approval didn't come, the project ended exactly where the contract said it would. The existing orchard house remained free of the proposed mortgage. My final 2 weeks were quiet in the way family silence is never quiet. Mom communicated through email. She approved my transition schedule without speaking to me. Shelby stopped entering the records room. When she needed a file, she sent the assistant coordinator. Dad came in several times, stood near the door, and asked practical questions he already knew the answers to. On my last Thursday, he brought coffee. This time, he brought one for me. He placed it beside my keyboard. I should have stopped the announcement, he said. Yes. I thought she'd sign if we got everyone there. I looked at him. Mom thought I'd sign. He nodded. I let her believe that. Did you believe it too? For a while. Why? Because you always came through. I turned the coffee cup between my hands. That's not the same as agreeing. I know that now. It wasn't an apology that repaired anything. It was an accurate sentence late. He sat in the folding chair across from me. Your mother says you chose strangers over the family. I chose a job. She doesn't see the difference. I know. Will you talk to her? When she can talk without asking me to fix something. He nodded. Then he asked, What about me? The question was quieter. You stood beside her until the clock almost reached 5. I asked her to give you authority. At 4:58, he looked down. I was afraid of making things worse. You made it worse for me. I know. I believed that he knew. I didn't know whether knowing would change him, so I didn't forgive him at the folding table beside the old refrigerator. I told him he could call me on Sunday after my last day if the call was about seeing me and not about Orchard House. He agreed. That was the first relationship I left partly open. Mom's stayed closed, Shelby's stayed angry, and my relationship with Orchard House changed from daily duty to a voting interest I could protect without living inside the building. The first Sunday after my last day, Dad called at 10 in the morning. I answered but didn't fill the silence for him. "Have you started the new job?" he asked. "Yes. How is it?" "Good. I'm still learning their systems." He asked about the drive, the staff, and whether the building was difficult to manage. He didn't mention Orchard House. After 15 minutes, he said, "Your mother wants to know if you'll come for dinner. Did she ask you to call?" "Yes." "Then she can ask me herself." "All right." He didn't argue. That was the first test. Mom didn't call that day. At the new job, I had a real office and a written schedule. The first week was mostly orientation. I used approved personal time from Orchard House, then returned later that week to finish the transition work I had promised. The conference center had problems because every venue does. A kitchen cooler failed during my second week. One ballroom divider jammed before a large meeting. A rental company delivered the wrong chairs. The difference was how people responded. When I explained the cooler problem, Paula asked, "What do you need?" Not, "Can't you just handle it?" Not, "Do this for the team." I told her I needed approval for an emergency repair and temporary refrigerated storage. She approved both. The catering manager moved the food. Maintenance called the technician. Nobody stood back while I carried the whole problem. I had spent so long being proud of how much I could absorb that shared responsibility felt almost suspicious. At Orchard House, the first 2 weekends after I left were difficult. The assistant coordinator sent me one email asking where to find an older vendor insurance certificate. I answered because it was part of my written transition. Shelby texted me that night. "The dishwasher is leaking. Do you know which valve shuts it off?" The answer was in the operations manual. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, Dad called. I let it ring. Then I reminded myself of the condition I had given him. Sunday calls about family, not the venue. He didn't leave a message. The next morning, I saw a text from him. "Found the valve. Plumber coming at 9. That was the second test. They had found the answer without me. The venue didn't collapse. They reduced the booking calendar for the rest of the year. They stopped accepting events on consecutive weekends and limited winter tastings. That cost them revenue, but it matched what they could actually operate. For the first time, capacity came before Shelby's promises. They hired an outside operations manager 6 weeks later. I knew because I still received member reports. The new manager's salary was higher than mine had been. The position included scheduled weekend coverage and authority over staffing, vendors, and safety decisions. I read the employment summary twice. Part of me wanted to be angry that they gave a stranger the authority I had requested for years. Mostly I was relieved. They had finally put the work into a real job instead of assigning it to a daughter. My first quarterly member meeting took place in the tasting room on a Monday. I attended as a voting member, not an employee. The outside operations manager joined for the first 20 minutes, gave a report, answered questions, and left. Nobody expected her to pour coffee or stay for family business. Shelby sat across from me with a prepared financial packet. She looked different. Not humbled, exactly, more careful. The cabin project was listed as canceled. The lost deposit appeared as a development expense. There was no softened description and no attempt to move it into another category. Shelby turned to the next page. I drafted new financial controls. The policy required member review before non-refundable development commitments. New debt involving company property required a full budget and written member consent before any public announcement. It didn't change the unanimous consent rule. It made the earlier steps harder to avoid. "Who prepared this?" I asked. "I did," Shelby said. Lena checked it. "Did Mom and Dad approve?" Dad said, "Yes." Mom nodded. I read each page. Shelby watched me. When I reached the signature line, she said, "This isn't tied to anything else." "What do you mean?" "I'm not asking you to approve another project." That was the closest she came to acknowledging what had happened. I signed the policy. All 4 of us also agreed to quarterly member meetings with written minutes. No decisions over Sunday dinner, no undocumented development accounts, no public announcements before approvals. The controls were ordinary. They should have existed already. Shelby remained managing director. I didn't object. I had never needed her job. I needed her decisions to stop becoming my emergencies. After the meeting, she followed me to the parking area. "Do you like your new place?" she asked. "Yes." "More than Orchard House?" "It's different." "That means yes." I unlocked my car. She stood beside the passenger door. "You could have told me you were leaving. You could have shown me the option contract." She looked toward the barn. "I thought if the project worked, everyone would stop comparing us." I closed the car door without getting in. Who was comparing us? Mom, people, everyone. Mom gave you the job. That didn't mean she thought I could do it. I watched her face. For years, I had assumed Shelby moved through the family without doubt. Maybe she did in some ways. In others, Mom's constant protection had taught her that any question was danger. That explained something. It didn't excuse what she did. "You tried to prove you could lead by hiding information from the people carrying the risk," I said. "I know." "Do you?" She nodded. "I lost the deposit." "The company lost it." Her face tightened, but she didn't argue. "I signed the controls," she said. "That's a start. Are we ever going to be normal?" "We weren't normal before." She gave a short laugh. "No, probably not." I told her she could call me about lunch or coffee. I also told her I would not advise her on events, staffing, vendors, or development outside the quarterly meetings. She agreed. The first time she called, she asked where I wanted to eat. The second time, she started to complain about a vendor and stopped herself. "Sorry," she said. "That's work." "Yes." She changed the subject. That mattered more than an apology would have. Mom took longer. For almost 3 months, she spoke to me only during member meetings. She was polite and exact. She never mentioned the dinner insult. Then she called one Tuesday evening. "I'd like to see you," she said. "What do you need?" "Nothing." I waited. She added, "I mean that. I'm not calling about the business. We met at a cafe near my apartment. Mom arrived early. She had already ordered tea but hadn't ordered for me. That was unusual. She normally decided what everyone wanted before they sat down. I bought my own coffee and joined her. She kept both hands around her cup. "I was cruel to you," she said. I didn't help her continue. "What I said at the dinner was cruel. Moving your office was cruel too." "Yes. I thought if I made you feel outside the project, you would work harder to get back inside. The honesty was ugly, but it was useful. You thought isolation would make me sign." "Yes. And you were willing to risk my job." She looked down. "Yes." I drank my coffee. She said, "I'm sorry. I believe you're sorry." Her eyes lifted. "That doesn't mean I trust you." "I know." "No, Mom. Listen, I won't work at Orchard House again. I won't be emergency help. I won't fix things during family visits. If you ask, I'll leave." She nodded. "I understand." We stayed another 20 minutes. She asked about my apartment and my job. She didn't ask me to forgive her. The apology didn't restore us. Her behavior afterward gave us something smaller to test. At Thanksgiving, I went to Mom and Dad's house for 2 hours. The oven stopped heating while dinner was inside. Everyone looked toward the kitchen. For 1 second, the old pattern was sitting there with us. Mom started to say my name. Then she stopped. She took out her phone, called a repair service, and moved the food to the smaller oven. Shelby adjusted the dishes. Dad went to buy extra rolls. Nobody asked me to solve it. We ate late. It was one of the best family dinners I could remember. I kept ordinary contact after that. Lunch once a month. Holiday visits with my own car parked where nobody could block it. Quarterly meetings with written agendas. When the conversation turned to work, I reminded them once. If it continued, I left. Twice I left. The third time, nobody brought work to the table. I had believed belonging meant becoming too useful to discard. I understand it differently now. If someone values me only while I'm carrying what they dropped, they value the carrying, not me. If you want more stories like mine, subscribe and tell me which city you're watching from. There's one part of that dinner night I still see clearly. After the loan failed, Mom left the cream-colored borrower folder on the closing table. Inside was a copy of the consent page. 3 signatures appeared beneath the authorization. My line remained empty. The barn lights were warm against the dark orchard. Servers were entering through the side hall with dinner plates. Dad had my clipboard. Shelby stood near the cabin model, trying to decide what to tell the guests. I took the brass key from my work ring. The little apple stamped into it caught the light. Nobody asked me to stay that time. I placed the brass office key beside the unsigned consent page and walked out through the lit orchard doors.